What if one stranger's kindness could rewrite two entire lives? When a rugged cowboy saw a desperate woman freezing outside a mountain store, he made a split-second decision that changed everything. He bought her a coat. She never left his side. But their journey from that frozen moment to building an empire wasn't easy. Betrayal, confrontation, and buried secrets threatened to tear them apart before they could even begin. This is their story. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The wind that cut through Cedar Ridge that December morning carried more than cold. It carried the kind of bitterness that settles into your bones and makes you question whether spring will ever come again. The mountain town sat hunched between granite peaks, its wooden buildings weathered gray by 100 winters just like this one. Smoke rose from chimneys in thin, desperate columns. Ice clung to everything. Daniel Mercer had seen plenty of harsh mornings in his 27 years, but something about this one felt different. He'd ridden into town before dawn to pick up supplies for the Iron Ridge Ranch, fence wire, salt blocks, a new blade for the saw that had finally given up the ghost after 2 decades of service. His horse, a steady bay gelding named Rust, stood tied outside Morrison's general store, breath steaming in the frozen air. Daniel had just loaded the last of the supplies into his saddlebags when he heard it, a sound so quiet he almost missed it, a soft, trembling exhale. The kind of breath someone takes when they're trying very hard not to be noticed. He turned. She was pressed against the wall beside the store's entrance, tucked into the narrow space between the building and a stack of empty crates. At first, Daniel thought she might be a shadow, just a trick of the early light, but then she moved and he saw her clearly. A woman. Young. Maybe 22, 23. Her dark hair hung loose and tangled around her shoulders, and she wore nothing but a thin cotton dress, pale blue, summer weight, completely inadequate for the killing cold. Her arms were wrapped tight around herself, hands tucked under her armpits. Her lips had gone the color of slate. She was shaking so hard he could see it from 15 feet away. Daniel stood frozen himself for a moment, supplies forgotten. Around them, the few townspeople who were out this early walked past without a second glance. Mrs. Henderson, the banker's wife, actually stepped around the woman as if she were an obstacle, her face set in practiced indifference. 2 ranch hands Daniel recognized from the Triple Creek spread glanced over, muttered something to each other, and kept walking. Nobody stopped. Daniel felt something twist in his chest, something hot and uncomfortable that had nothing to do with the cold. He didn't know her name, didn't know her story, didn't know if she was local or passing through, whether she'd been there 10 minutes or 10 hours. None of that mattered. What mattered was simple and undeniable. She was freezing to death on a public street, and everyone was pretending not to see. Not him. Daniel turned on his heel and walked back into Morrison's. The store's interior hit him with a wall of warmth from the pot-bellied stove in the corner. Harvey Morrison stood behind the counter, counting change from the register. He looked up when Daniel entered, surprise crossing his weathered face. "Forget something, Mercer?" "Yeah," Daniel said, already moving toward the back wall where Morrison kept clothing and dry goods. "I need a coat." "You wearing one already?" Harvey pointed out, nodding at Daniel's own heavy sheepskin jacket. "Not for me." Daniel scanned the selection hanging from pegs along the wall. There wasn't much. Cedar Ridge wasn't exactly a fashion capital, but there, third from the left, hung a woman's wool coat. Deep crimson, heavy fabric, lined with what looked like flannel. It had probably been sitting there since last winter, maybe longer. Not many women in town could afford something that nice, and those who could usually ordered from catalogs. "How much for that red coat?" Harvey squinted at him, then at the coat. "The lady's winter wool? Let me check." He pulled out a ledger, ran his finger down a column of numbers. $8 even. $8. That was nearly a week's wages. Daniel didn't hesitate. He pulled the money from his pocket, the same money he'd been saving for a new saddle, the one with the deeper seat that didn't leave his back aching after a long day. He counted out 8 silver dollars onto the counter. Harvey's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. "You buying a coat for $8 and you won't even tell me who it's for?" "Does it matter?" "I suppose not." Harvey took down the coat and folded it carefully. Your money spends same as anyone's. Daniel took the coat and walked back outside. She was still there, still shaking. If anything, she looked worse than before. Her face had gone beyond pale into something almost translucent. Her eyes were closed. Daniel wondered if she was even fully conscious. He crossed the distance between them in 4 long strides. "Miss," he said quietly. Her eyes snapped open, brown, wide, frightened. She flinched back against the wall, and Daniel saw her whole body tense, ready to run or fight, or both. He stopped immediately, holding both hands up, the coat draped over his forearm. "Easy," he said, keeping his voice low and steady, the same tone he used with spooked horses. "I'm not going to hurt you. You're freezing. I bought you this." He held out the coat. She stared at it like it might bite her. Then her eyes moved to his face, searching for something. A trap, maybe. A trick. Some hidden price she'd be expected to pay. Daniel understood that look. He'd seen it on animals that had been mistreated. That wariness that went bone deep. "It's yours," he said simply. "No strings, no expectations. You need it more than I need the money." For a long moment, she didn't move. The wind howled down the street, kicking up small tornadoes of snow and ice. Daniel could see her weighing it, calculating risks he couldn't begin to guess at. Then, slowly, she reached out. Her fingers were like ice when they brushed against his hand, taking the coat. She pulled it around her shoulders with movements that were clumsy with cold, and Daniel saw the exact moment the warmth hit her. Her eyes closed again, but this time it wasn't unconsciousness. It was relief so profound it almost looked like pain. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice was rough, barely audible. Thank you." Daniel nodded. He should probably leave now. He'd done what needed doing. The woman had a coat. She'd be okay. He should get back on Rust and ride back to Iron Ridge before Walter started wondering where he'd gotten to. But he didn't move. "Have you eaten?" The question came out before he'd planned it. She opened her eyes again, and this time there was something different in them. Not just wariness, actual emotion, surprise maybe, or confusion that someone would ask. She started, then stopped, swallowed hard. "Not recently." "Come on." Daniel gestured toward the small restaurant 2 doors down, Emma's kitchen. "Let me buy you breakfast." "You've already—" "And I'm offering to do more. It's just breakfast. Hash and eggs, maybe some coffee. Then I'll leave you be if that's what you want." She looked at him for a long time. Daniel had the strange feeling she was seeing right through him, reading something in his face that he didn't know was written there. Finally, she nodded. They walked to Emma's kitchen in silence. Daniel noticed she moved stiffly, like someone whose muscles had locked up from the cold, or someone who was hurt. He held the door for her, and she stepped inside with obvious reluctance. Someone used to doorways being dangerous places. Emma Hayes, who'd been running the restaurant for as long as Daniel could remember, looked up from the griddle and took in the scene with sharp, knowing eyes. She was a woman in her 50s, built solid, with gray-streaked hair pulled back in a practical bun. "Daniel Mercer," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "And a friend?" "We need 2 plates of whatever you've got hot," Daniel said. "And coffee, lots of coffee." Emma's gaze moved to the woman in the crimson coat, and something in her expression softened. "Take the corner table. I'll bring it right out." The corner table offered a view of both the door and the windows. Daniel noticed the woman chose the seat that gave her the clearest line of sight to the exits. Another tell. Another story he didn't know but could read in small gestures. Emma brought the coffee first, thick, bitter, hot enough to strip paint. The woman wrapped both hands around the cup like it was precious, like it was life itself. "I'm Daniel," he said after a moment. "Daniel Mercer." She looked up from the coffee, hesitated, then, Eliza Hart." "Pleased to meet you, Eliza." "Are you?" The question came out sharper than maybe she intended. "Or are you just being polite?" Daniel considered that. "Both, I suppose, but more the first than the second." That almost got a smile. Almost. Emma returned with 2 plates piled high. Scrambled eggs, thick slices of ham, fried potatoes, fresh bread with butter. Eliza stared at the food like she couldn't quite believe it was real. Then she picked up her fork and started eating with the careful control of someone who was absolutely starving but didn't want to show it. Daniel ate more slowly, watching her between bites. "How long have you been in Cedar Ridge?" he asked. "3 days." She didn't look up from her plate. "I walked from Silver Creek." Silver Creek was 40 miles east, over rough terrain, in winter, in that thin dress. "That's a long walk," Daniel said carefully. "It was necessary." He didn't push. Instead, he said, "You have family here? Friends?" "No." "Place to stay?" Her hand stilled on her fork. "Not exactly." "Where have you been sleeping?" Eliza set down the fork and met his eyes directly for the first time. There was steel there, under the exhaustion, pride that hadn't been broken, despite whatever she'd been through. "That's my concern," she said quietly. "You've been more than kind, Mr. Mercer, more than I had any right to expect. But I won't be anyone's charity case, and I won't be anyone's anything else." The last 2 words carried weight, implication. Daniel felt his face heat slightly. "I'm not asking for anything, Miss Hart. I'm just trying to figure out if you need help." "Why?" The question hung in the air between them. Why? Good question. Why had he turned around? Why had he spent $8, a week's wages, on a stranger's coat? Why was he sitting here buying breakfast for someone whose last name he'd learned 5 minutes ago? "Because you needed it," Daniel said finally, "and because I could help. That seems like reason enough." Eliza studied him for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, her eyes grew bright. Not quite tears, but close. "I'm not used to that," she said softly. "To kindness without conditions." "Then you've been around the wrong people." "Apparently so." They finished the meal in more comfortable silence. When the plates were empty, Emma came by to refill their coffee. "You need anything else, honey?" she asked Eliza directly, her tone gentle. "No, ma'am." "Thank you. This was perfect." Emma nodded, patted Eliza's shoulder once, and moved on to other tables. Daniel pulled out his pocket watch. Nearly 8 o'clock. Walter would be wondering where he'd gotten to. The fence repairs weren't going to do themselves. "I have to head back to the ranch," he said. "But before I go, you need work?" Eliza's eyes widened. "What?" "Work. The ranch I work at, Iron Ridge, about 5 miles west of here. The owner, Walter Boone, he's been looking for a new cook since old Maggie retired last month. The hands have been taking turns at it, and let me tell you, cowboys shouldn't be allowed near a stove unsupervised." I can cook, but I don't know if—" "You can cook?" "Yes, but then come talk to Walter. Worst he can say is no. Best case, you've got a job and a place to stay. The cook's cabin is small, but it's warm and dry." Eliza looked down at her empty plate. Daniel could see her thinking, weighing options, calculating risks again. "Why are you doing this?" she asked without looking up. "Same reason as before. You need it, and I can help." "You don't know anything about me. I know you walked 40 miles in winter in a summer dress. I know you'd rather freeze than beg. I know you've got pride and grit, and those are worth more than a fancy resume." Daniel pushed back from the table and stood. "The offer's there. If you want it, I'll be out front with my horse. If you don't, then I wish you well, Miss Hart, truly." He paid Emma for both meals, collected his hat, and walked outside. Rust was waiting patiently, as always. Daniel untied the reins and checked the saddle, giving Eliza time to make her decision. He didn't look back at the restaurant. Didn't want to pressure her. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. He was just about to mount up when he heard the door open behind him. Eliza stepped out into the cold, the crimson coat wrapped tight around her. She walked up to him, lifted her chin, and said, "I'll work hard. I won't cause trouble. And I pay my own way. No charity." Daniel felt something loosen in his chest. "Fair enough. Can you ride?" "Not well." "Rust here is gentle. You can ride behind me. It's not far." She looked at the horse with obvious apprehension, but nodded. Daniel swung up into the saddle, then offered her his hand. She took it. Her grip was still cold, but stronger than before, and he pulled her up behind him. She settled awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable with the proximity. "You'll want to hold on," Daniel said. Roads are icy. After a moment's hesitation, her arms came around his waist. Light, tentative. Ready? As I'll ever be. Daniel clicked his tongue, and Russ started walking. They left Cedar Ridge behind as the sun finally cleared the eastern peaks, painting the snow gold and pink. The road to Iron Ridge wound through pine forests heavy with white, past frozen creeks and open meadows where elk grazed in the early light. Under different circumstances, it would have been beautiful. Eliza didn't say a word the entire ride, but Daniel could feel her trembling, not from cold this time, he thought, from fear, from uncertainty, from the sheer terror of trusting a stranger because she had no other choice. He rode carefully, keeping Russ to an easy walk, avoiding the worst of the ice. They were about 2 miles from the ranch when Eliza finally spoke. What if he says no? Her voice was barely audible over the wind. Your boss. What if he doesn't want to hire me? Then we'll figure something else out. We? Well, I'm not just going to leave you on the side of the road. You barely know me. I'm learning. She was quiet for another moment. Then, I'm running from something. Daniel had already guessed that. Figured. Doesn't that bother you? Depends on what you're running from. A man who thought he owned me because he paid for my room and board, who thought I owed him things because he kept me fed. Her voice was flat, factual, but Daniel heard the rage underneath. The violation. I disagreed. Left in the middle of the night. He'll be looking for me. Daniel felt his jaw tighten. He won't find you at Iron Ridge, and if he does, he'll have to go through every man on that ranch. Walter doesn't abide that kind of behavior. You're very sure of that. I've worked for Walter Boone for 6 years. I've seen him beat a man senseless for hitting a horse too hard. A man who hurts women? Daniel shook his head. He wouldn't tolerate it. None of us would. Eliza's arms tightened around his waist slightly, not in fear this time, in something that might have been hope. They rode on. Iron Ridge Ranch announced itself slowly. First the smell of wood smoke and livestock, then the sound of cattle lowing in the distance, then finally the buildings themselves. The main ranch house sat solid and square at the center, built from logs and river stone, smoke rising from 3 different chimneys. Around it spread the bunkhouse, the barn, the equipment sheds, the corrals. Everything built to last, to withstand mountain winters and the test of time. Daniel guided Russ toward the main house, where he could see Walter Boone standing on the porch, apparently waiting for him. Walter was a man in his mid-50s, built like a bull, broad shoulders, thick arms, a face weathered by decades of outdoor work. His hair had gone mostly gray, but his eyes were sharp and missed nothing. He watched Daniel ride up with a woman behind him, and his expression shifted from irritation at the late return to something more thoughtful. Mercer, he said as Daniel dismounted. I was starting to think you'd decided to take the scenic route. Had some unexpected business in town. Daniel turned and helped Eliza down from the horse. She stumbled slightly, legs stiff from the ride, and Daniel steadied her with a hand on her elbow. Walter's eyes took in the crimson coat, the thin dress visible beneath it, Eliza's exhausted face. His expression didn't change, but Daniel knew him well enough to read the assessment happening behind those eyes. Walter Boone, Daniel said, this is Eliza Hart. Miss Hart, this is Walter Boone, owner of Iron Ridge. Mr. Boone, Eliza's voice was steady, despite everything. She met his gaze directly. Miss Hart. Walter descended the porch steps slowly, looking at her with the same careful attention he gave to horses he was thinking of buying. Daniel bringing you here for a reason or just showing you the sights? I told her you were looking for a cook, Daniel said. She can cook. She needs work. Seemed like it might be a good fit. Walter's eyes moved to Daniel, and there was something almost amused in them. Did you now? Yes, sir. And you can vouch for this young lady's character? I can vouch that she walked 40 miles in winter rather than accept circumstances she didn't choose. I'd say that speaks pretty well. Walter turned back to Eliza. You can cook? Yes, sir. How well? Well enough that you'll eat it twice and ask for more. That got a flicker of a smile from Walter. Confident. Honest. Difference between the two. He rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. Here's my problem, Miss Hart. I got 8 ranch hands who've been taking turns cooking for 2 months now, and they're about ready to murder each other over who burned the beans last. I need someone who can cook 3 squares a day for 10 people, keep the kitchen stocked and clean, and not cause drama. Can you do that? Yes, sir, I can. You got references? Eliza hesitated. No, sir. I left my last situation without proper notice. That a polite way of saying you ran? She lifted her chin. Yes, sir, it is. Walter studied her for a long moment. Then he said, Tell me something, Miss Hart. You run from the law or from a man? A man. He have a rightful claim on you? Husband, father? No, sir. No claim at all, rightful or otherwise. Walter nodded slowly. Then I don't see we have a problem. Here's what I'm offering. You cook dinner tonight. You cook breakfast tomorrow. If my men don't complain, and they will complain if you're no good, then you got yourself a job. $40 a month, plus room and board in the cook's cabin. Meals come out of the ranch supplies. 1 day off a week. Your choice, which one? You cause trouble, you're out. You steal, you're out. You don't pull your weight, you're out. That clear? Crystal clear, Mr. Boone. One more thing. You see that bunkhouse? He pointed to the long, low building across the yard. That's where the hands sleep. You don't go in there unless the building's on fire. They don't come in your cabin unless you invite them. Any man crosses that line, you tell me. I'll handle it. Understood? Yes, sir. Good. Daniel, show her to Maggie's old place. Help her get settled, then get yourself back here. We got fence to mend before it snows again. Yes, sir. Walter turned and walked back into the house without another word. Eliza let out a breath she'd apparently been holding. Is he always that direct? Always. But he's fair, and he keeps his word. If he says you're protected here, you are. I got the job then? Just like that? You got a trial. But between you and me, Walter's already decided. He wouldn't have told you the rules if he didn't expect you to be staying. Daniel collected Russ's reins and started leading the horse toward the barn. Eliza fell into step beside him, moving carefully on the uneven ground. The cook's cabin sat about 30 yards from the main house, a small, sturdy structure with a stone chimney and real glass windows. It had stood empty since Maggie retired, and Daniel had made sure it stayed in good repair, knowing Walter would need to fill the position eventually. He pushed open the door and stepped back to let Eliza enter first. The interior was simple but adequate. One large main room with a pot-bellied stove, a narrow bed with an iron frame, a table with 2 chairs, some shelves, and storage. A small washroom off to one side. Everything clean, everything functional. Eliza walked slowly through the space, running her fingers along the table, looking out the window at the mountains beyond. It's perfect, she said quietly. It's small. It's mine. She turned to face him, and there were definitely tears in her eyes now. It's mine, and I earned it, and no one can... Her voice cracked. Daniel looked away, giving her a moment of privacy. I'll bring in some wood. Get the stove going. It'll warm up quick. He busied himself with the firewood, building a proper fire in the stove while Eliza collected herself. When the flames were crackling nicely, he straightened and brushed off his hands. Kitchen's in the main house, he said. I'll take you over there in a bit, show you where everything is. Dinner's usually at 6. Hands come in hungry and tired, so nothing fancy needed. Just filling and hot. I can manage that. I believe you can. Daniel moved toward the door, then paused. Miss Hart, Eliza, what you said earlier about not being anyone's charity case. I meant what I said. This is work. You'll earn every penny, but if you need anything, anything at all, you ask. Not because you owe me, but because sometimes people need help. That's all. She looked at him with those brown eyes that had already seen too much. Why? She asked again. Why did you stop this morning? Why didn't you just walk past like everyone else? Daniel thought about that, about the sound of her breathing, the way no one else seemed to see her, the certainty that he couldn't be the kind of man who turned away. My father used to say there are 2 kinds of people in this world, he said finally. Those who see suffering and look away, and those who see it and can't. I guess I'm the second kind. That's a hard way to live. Maybe. but it's the only way I know how." He touched the brim of his hat and stepped outside, pulling the door closed behind him. The afternoon passed in hard physical work. Daniel rode the fence line with two other hands, replacing posts that had rotted, tightening wire that had gone slack. The work was cold and tedious, but it was also familiar, grounding. It gave him time to think. He thought about Eliza Hart and her summer dress, about the fear in her eyes when he'd first approached, about the steel underneath that fear, about the way she'd looked at the cabin like it was a palace instead of a one-room shack, about the man she'd run from and the 40 miles she'd walked to escape him. Daniel had grown up in Cedar Ridge, lived here all his life except for 2 years working ranches down in Colorado. He knew this place, knew its rhythms and its people. He knew the good ones and the bad ones and all the ones in between. He also knew that kindness was a choice, same as cruelty, and he'd made his choice. By the time 6 o'clock rolled around, Daniel and the other hands were cold, exhausted, and absolutely starving. They trudged into the main house, stamping snow from their boots, hanging coats on pegs by the door. The smell hit them before they even reached the dining room. Roasted chicken, fresh bread, something with onions and butter, the kind of smell that makes your stomach wake up and start demanding immediate attention. The hands looked at each other with something approaching religious wonder. "Is that real food?" asked Tommy Chen, a young hand who'd been at Iron Ridge for less than a year. "Smells real," said Ben Morrison, Harvey's nephew, who'd been doing most of the cooking lately and doing it poorly. They filed into the dining room to find the long table already set, and in the center, platters of actual, honest-to-God, properly cooked food. Roasted chicken with crispy skin, mashed potatoes with gravy, green beans that hadn't been boiled into mush, fresh bread with butter, even a pie, apple from the smell of it. Eliza stood in the kitchen doorway, watching them with visible nervousness. The hands stared at the food, then at her, then at the food again. Walter Boone entered last, surveyed the table, and sat down at the head. "Well, let's see if it tastes as good as it smells." For the next 10 minutes, the only sounds were eating and the occasional grunt of satisfaction. Daniel watched Eliza relax incrementally as plate after plate was emptied and refilled. Her cooking was simple, nothing fancy, but it was good, real good. The kind of food that stuck to your ribs and made you remember your mother's kitchen, if you were lucky enough to have had a good one. When the pie came out, Ben Morrison actually groaned. "I think I died," he said. "I think I died and went to heaven, and heaven has pie." A few of the others laughed. Eliza's face flushed slightly, but Daniel saw the pleased smile she tried to hide. After dinner, Walter pushed back from the table and looked directly at Eliza. "Breakfast is at 5:30, he said. "Don't be late." It wasn't effusive praise, but coming from Walter Boone, it might as well have been a standing ovation. Eliza nodded. "Yes, sir, 5:30. The hands helped clear the table, something they'd rarely done when they were cooking for themselves. As they filed out, each one offered Eliza a nod or a quiet "thank you," or, in Ben's case, "that was the best meal I've had in 6 months." Daniel lingered, helping dry dishes while Eliza washed. "You passed the test," he said. "Seems so. How do you feel?" She was quiet for a moment, hands stilling in the dishwater. "Safe," she said finally. "For the first time in longer than I can remember, I feel safe." Daniel dried another plate. "Good. That's good." They worked in comfortable silence for a while. The kitchen was warm, the work was easy, and outside the windows, the mountains were turning purple in the twilight. "Daniel?" "Yeah?" "That coat, the red one. Why that color? There were probably cheaper ones." He thought about how to answer that. "Because," he said slowly, "you looked like you'd been invisible for too long. I figured you deserved to be seen." Eliza turned to look at him, dishwater dripping from her hands. Her eyes were bright again, but this time she didn't try to hide the tears. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me." "You're welcome." He finished the last dish, hung up the towel, and headed for the door. Paused, turned back. "Tomorrow night, after dinner, some of the hands usually play cards in the bunkhouse. Nothing fancy, just some poker and tall tales. You're welcome to join, if you want. Or if you'd rather have quiet, that's fine too. I'll think about it." "Fair enough. Sleep well, Miss Hart." "Eliza, You can call me Eliza." "Eliza, then. Sleep well." He walked back to the bunkhouse through the dark, breath steaming in the cold air. Above, the stars were coming out, thousands of them, the way they only did this far from cities and electric lights. Daniel thought about coats and kindness, about the way small choices could ripple outward in ways you couldn't predict. He'd stopped this morning because he couldn't walk past someone in need. And now there was a woman in Maggie's cabin, safe and warm and fed, who might not have survived another night on her own. It felt right. It felt like something that mattered. He didn't know yet, couldn't possibly know, that this was the first chapter of something much bigger. That the woman he'd helped today would become his partner, his wife, his legacy. That decades from now, their grandchildren would tell the story of the cowboy and the coat and the day everything changed. All he knew was that he'd seen someone suffering and he'd chosen not to look away. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's everything. Inside the cook's cabin, Eliza Hart sat by the window, wrapped in her crimson coat, watching the stars emerge. She was warm. She was fed. She was safe. And for the first time since she could remember, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, tomorrow might be better than today. The coat hung on a peg beside the door, a reminder, a promise, a beginning. Winter settled over Iron Ridge like a heavy blanket, and with it came a rhythm that Eliza had never known before, a rhythm built on honest work, full meals, and the absence of fear. She woke before dawn each morning, stoked the fire in her cabin until warmth chased away the night chill, then made her way through the dark to the main house kitchen. By the time the first gray light touched the eastern peaks, she had coffee brewing and bacon sizzling, the smells pulling the ranch hands from their bunks like a siren song. The work was hard. Cooking for 10 people 3 times a day was no small feat, especially with appetites sharpened by physical labor in brutal cold. But Eliza discovered something she hadn't expected. She was good at this. More than good. The kitchen became her domain, her kingdom, and she ruled it with quiet efficiency. The hands learned quickly not to mess with her system. Everything had its place. The cast iron stayed seasoned. The knives stayed sharp. And anyone who didn't scrape their plate into the slop bucket before leaving it in the wash basin got a look that could freeze water. "Miss Eliza runs a tight ship," Tommy Chen said one morning, grinning as he collected his plate of eggs and biscuits. He was the youngest of the crew, barely 20, with an easy smile and a tendency to talk too much. "Tight ship means good food," Ben Morrison replied, already working on his second helping. "I'll follow any rules she wants." Eliza felt the corner of her mouth twitch upward. She was getting used to their banter, the easy camaraderie that filled the dining room each meal. It was so different from the tense, dangerous atmosphere of the boarding house she'd fled. Here, the men treated her with respect. Some were friendly, some were quiet, but all of them seemed to understand the unspoken rules Walter had laid down. She was crew. She was protected. And that was that. Daniel usually ate quickly and quietly, offering her a nod of thanks before heading out to whatever task Walter had assigned. But Eliza noticed things. The way he always made sure to compliment something specific about the meal. The way he'd started showing up at the woodpile behind her cabin every few days, restocking her supply without being asked. The way his eyes would find her across the room sometimes, checking to make sure she was okay. She told herself it didn't mean anything. He was just being kind, the way he'd been kind from the beginning. But late at night, alone in her cabin with the fire burning low, she found herself thinking about him more than was probably wise. 3 weeks into her employment, a blizzard hit. It started as light snow around midday, nothing unusual for January in the mountains, but by evening, the wind had picked up to a howl, and the snow was coming down so thick you couldn't see 10 feet. Walter called all the hands in early, not wanting anyone caught out in it. They gathered in the dining room for supper, stomping snow from their boots and shaking ice from their hats. The mood was good despite the weather. Storms meant a night off from outside work, a chance to rest and recover. Eliza had made beef stew, thick with vegetables and meat, and fresh cornbread still warm from the oven. The men ate with gusto, the conversation flowing easily. "This keeps up, we'll be snowed in for days," said Marcus Tate, the oldest hand on the ranch. He was in his 40s, weathered and quiet, with hands that bore the scars of a lifetime working cattle. "Seen it happen before. 89 winter, we couldn't get out for near 2 weeks. Long as Miss Eliza's cooking holds out, I ain't complaining," Ben said. Pantry's well stocked, Eliza assured them from the kitchen doorway. We could feed twice this number for a month if we needed to. See? We're in good hands. Tommy raised his coffee cup in a mock toast to Miss Eliza, who keeps us fed and functional. The others joined in, and Eliza felt warmth that had nothing to do with the stove. These men, rough, hard-working, often crude, had welcomed her without question, had trusted her on Walter's word and Daniel's recommendation, had given her a place when she'd had nowhere else to go. After dinner, as promised by the storm, most of the hands stayed in the main house rather than trudging through the blizzard to the bunkhouse. Someone produced a deck of cards. Someone else brought out a bottle of whiskey that Walter pretended not to see. You play poker, Miss Eliza? Tommy asked as they cleared a space at the table. I've played. Want in on a hand? She hesitated. In her old life, cards had been dangerous. Men who drank and gambled often became unpredictable. But this felt different, safe. Penny ante only, Walter said from his chair by the fire, apparently reading her hesitation. Anyone gets rowdy, I'll throw them out in the snow personally. In that case, Eliza said, deal me in. She pulled up a chair between Daniel and Marcus. The game was simple 5-card draw, nothing fancy. The stakes were indeed pennies, more about the competition than the money. Eliza had learned to play from her father before he died, before everything fell apart. She'd been good once. Turned out she still was. On the third hand, she bluffed Tommy out of a pot with nothing but a pair of threes. You hustling us, Miss Eliza? He complained good-naturedly. I'm playing cards, not my fault you can't read a bluff. Daniel laughed, a rare sound that transformed his usually serious face. She's got you there, Tommy. Whose side are you on? Truth's side, which means hers. The game continued, the conversation flowing around it. Stories were traded, tall tales about wild horses and wilder cattle drives, near misses with mountain lions. The winter-old Pete Jameson supposedly fought off a bear with nothing but a shovel. That's a lie and you know it, Marcus said. I'm just telling you what Pete told me. Pete couldn't fight off a determined chicken. Laughter filled the room. Outside, the storm raged, but inside there was warmth and light, and the kind of easy companionship that came from shared work and mutual respect. Eliza felt something loosen in her chest, something that had been tight and knotted for so long she'd forgotten it was there. She was laughing, actually laughing, without fear or calculation or wondering what it would cost her later. At some point, she looked up and found Daniel watching her, not the way some men watched, with hunger or entitlement, just watching, with something soft in his expression. Their eyes met, held. Then Tommy slapped down a winning hand and the moment broke. The game went on until nearly midnight, when Walter finally stood and announced that anyone who wasn't passed out drunk had better find a place to sleep because he wasn't dragging bodies anywhere. The hands scattered, some to the bunkhouse, some to spare rooms in the main house. Eliza gathered her coat, preparing for the short walk to her cabin. I'll walk with you, Daniel said, appearing at her elbow. It's not far. It's a whiteout. You could get turned around in 10 steps. He was right. Eliza could barely see the porch railing through the snow. They stepped out into the storm together. The wind hit like a physical force, stealing breath and stinging exposed skin. Daniel took her arm, anchoring her against the gusts, and they pushed through the drifts toward her cabin. It took 5 minutes to cover 30 yards. By the time they reached her door, they were both covered in snow and breathing hard. You okay? Daniel had to shout over the wind. Fine. Thank you. He nodded, started to turn away. Daniel. She caught his sleeve. Do you want to come in? Just for a minute. Warm up before you go back. He hesitated, clearly weighing propriety against practical sense. The storm made the decision for him as a particularly vicious gust nearly knocked them both over. Just for a minute, he agreed. Inside, Eliza's cabin was blessedly warm. She'd banked the fire before dinner and it had kept the space comfortable. She quickly built it back up while Daniel stood awkwardly by the door, dripping snow onto the floor. Here, she handed him a towel. You're making a puddle. Sorry. Don't apologize. Just dry off before you freeze. They both shed their outer layers, hanging coats to dry by the stove. Daniel looked around the cabin, the first time he'd been inside since that first day. It had changed. Small touches everywhere spoke of Eliza making it hers. Curtains on the windows sewn from fabric she'd bought with her first wages. A few books on the shelf, borrowed from Walter's library. A small vase on the table with dried flowers someone had given her. "You've made it nice," Daniel said. "It's home." The word came out soft, almost wondering. "I never thought I'd have that again." "You deserve it." "Do I?" "Yes." Eliza moved to the small shelf where she kept a tea tin and 2 cups. "Tea? I know it's not what the hands drink, but tea sounds perfect." She prepared it carefully, the ritual giving her hands something to do while her mind raced. Having Daniel here, in her private space, felt significant somehow, dangerous maybe, but in a way that made her heart beat faster rather than with fear. They sat at her small table, cups warming their hands. "You were happy tonight," Daniel said after a moment. "At the card game. I saw it." "I was. I am." She looked down at her tea. "This place is... you people, you've given me something I didn't think existed anymore." "What's that?" "A life that's mine. Work I chose. People who don't want anything from me except honest labor." She paused. "It's more than I ever hoped for when I left Silver Creek." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Can I ask you something?" "You can ask. I might not answer." "Fair enough." He turned his cup in his hand, studying it. "That man you ran from, the one in Silver Creek. What would he do if he found you?" Eliza felt ice slide down her spine. She'd been trying not to think about Victor, about his cold eyes and colder calculations, about the way he'd looked at her like she was property. "Try to take me back," she said quietly. "He's not the kind of man who lets things go, especially things he thinks belong to him." "You didn't belong to him." "He paid my room and board after my father died. In his mind, that made me his, to do with as he pleased." Her voice hardened. "I disagreed." "What was his name?" "Why?" "So I know who to hit if he shows up." Despite everything, that pulled a small smile from her. "Victor Hale. He was my cousin, actually. Distant relation. Took me in after the funeral, said it was family duty. But duty wasn't what he had in mind." "Did he hurt you?" The question was gentle, but Eliza heard the steel underneath. "He tried. Once. I broke his nose with a fireplace poker." She met Daniel's eyes. "That's when I left. I knew it would get worse if I stayed." Daniel's jaw was tight. "If he comes here, he won't. Silver Creek is 40 miles away. He doesn't know where I went, and even if he found out, he's too proud to chase after hired help. He'll find some other girl to torment. You're not just hired help." To him, that's all I'd ever be. Outside, the wind screamed against the cabin walls. Inside, the silence stretched. "I should go," Daniel said finally. "Let you get some rest." But he didn't move. Neither did Eliza. "Why did you do it?" she asked softly. "That morning in town, why stop? Why care?" "I told you." "No, the real reason, not the noble answer you gave before. The truth." Daniel looked at her for a long time. His eyes were gray in the firelight, serious and steady. "Because," he said slowly, "when I saw you standing there, freezing and alone, all I could think was that someone should have cared sooner. Someone should have seen you hurting and done something about it before you had to run. And since no one else did, I was going to be the one who did. That's still noble. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just selfish." "Selfish?" "Yeah." His voice dropped lower. "Because from the moment I put that coat around your shoulders and saw the way you looked at me, like I'd given you the world instead of $8 of wool, I knew I was in trouble. Real trouble." Eliza's breath caught. "What kind of trouble?" "The kind where I think about you when I should be thinking about fence posts. Where I find excuses to check if you need firewood. Where I sit through card games just hoping to hear you laugh." He stood abruptly, shoving his chair back. "See? Selfish. I should go." "Daniel." He stopped at the door, one hand on the latch. Eliza stood, crossed the small space between them. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it. I think about you too, she said quietly. When I'm cooking, when I'm falling asleep, when I wake up and see that coat hanging by my door and remember that someone cared enough to stop. Eliza, I'm not asking for anything. I'm not ready for anything. I just needed you to know that you're not alone in this trouble. They stood inches apart, the air between them charged with possibility and restraint. Daniel lifted one hand slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. When you're ready, he said softly, if you're ever ready, I'll be here. Then he pulled on his coat and stepped out into the storm. Eliza stood in the doorway, watching him disappear into the swirling white. Her fingers touched the place where his hand had been. Something had shifted tonight. Some line had been crossed, or at least acknowledged. She closed the door, leaned against it, and let herself smile. The storm lasted 3 days. Snow piled up in drifts that reached the eaves. The hands spent their time maintaining the animals, shoveling paths, and keeping the fires burning. Eliza cooked constantly, soups and stews and anything that could stretch to feed however many people ended up stranded at the ranch. On the second day, 2 travelers appeared at the door, half frozen from trying to make it to town. Walter took them in without question. By the 3rd day, there were 15 people at the ranch instead of 10. Eliza managed. She always managed. But she was aware, constantly, of Daniel. The way he'd appear to help carry heavy pots without being asked. The way he'd make sure she ate something herself, since she tended to forget in the rush of feeding everyone else. The way he'd catch her eye across a crowded room and smile. Small, private, just for her. Nothing happened. Nothing changed. But everything was different. When the storm finally broke and the travelers left with thanks and warm bellies, life returned to its regular rhythm. Except now, Eliza found herself looking forward to mealtimes in a way that had nothing to do with cooking. February came, then March. The snow began to melt. Mud season arrived, turning the ranch into a squelching mess that tracked into everything. Eliza had been at Iron Ridge for 3 months. She'd saved nearly all her wages, $40, a small fortune to her. She'd bought fabric and made herself 2 new dresses. She'd learned every hand's favorite meal and made sure to rotate through them. She'd become part of the ranch's machinery, as essential as the barn or the well. She'd also, despite her best efforts not to, fallen halfway in love with Daniel Mercer. It was small things. The way he always said please and thank you, the way he treated his horse with gentle respect, the way he'd stand up for anyone who needed it, regardless of personal cost. The way he looked at her like she was something precious instead of something useful. She tried to be practical about it. She was still healing, still learning to trust. And Daniel deserved someone whole, someone who didn't wake up some nights in a cold sweat, remembering hands that grabbed too hard and words that cut too deep. But her heart didn't care about practical. One evening in late March, after the dinner dishes were done, Daniel appeared at her cabin door. "Evening, Miss Eliza. We've established you can call me Eliza, you know." Habit. He shifted his weight, suddenly seeming uncertain. "You got a minute?" "Of course. Come in." He entered, hat in hands, looking more nervous than she'd ever seen him. "Is something wrong?" she asked. "No, maybe. I don't know." He took a breath. "There's a dance next week, in town, spring social. Most of the hands are going, and I thought, that is, if you wanted, maybe you'd like to go? With me?" Eliza's heart did something complicated in her chest. "A dance?" "Yeah, it's nothing fancy. Just the town hall and some music and people who've been cooped up all winter wanting to socialize. But there's usually decent food, and the company's not bad, and I thought you might enjoy getting away from the ranch for an evening." He was babbling. Daniel Mercer, who barely said 3 words most days, was babbling. It was adorable. "I'd like that," Eliza said. "I'd like that very much." The relief that crossed his face was almost comical. "Yeah? Really?" "Really, though I should warn you, I'm not much of a dancer." "That makes 2 of us. We'll figure it out together." After he left, Eliza sat down hard in her chair. A dance. With Daniel. In public, where everyone would see them together. It felt like a declaration, like stepping out of the shadows and into the light. It felt terrifying. It felt right. The week passed in a blur of anticipation and nerves. Eliza finished a new dress, soft green cotton that brought out the color in her eyes. She practiced dancing steps in her cabin when no one was around, feeling foolish but determined not to embarrass Daniel. The other hands noticed the preparations and offered good-natured teasing. "Danny Boy's finally making his move," Ben said one morning over breakfast. "About time," Marcus added. "Been watching him moon over her for months." "I have not been mooning," Daniel protested, his ears going red. "Sure you haven't. That's why you check the kitchen every 10 minutes to see if she needs firewood." "The cabin needs firewood." In July. The table erupted in laughter. Even Eliza smiled from the kitchen, though her own face felt warm. The day of the dance arrived clear and bright. Spring was finally asserting itself, crocuses pushing through the melting snow, birds returning to the pine trees, the air carrying that particular scent of earth waking up. Daniel borrowed Walter's wagon for the trip to town. He showed up at Eliza's cabin, freshly shaved, wearing what was clearly his best shirt and looking nervous enough to bolt. "You look beautiful," he said when she opened the door. "You clean up pretty well yourself." The ride to Cedar Ridge took an hour. They talked easily, about nothing and everything. Daniel told her about growing up in town, about his parents who died in an influenza outbreak when he was 19, about why he'd chosen ranch work over the mining that employed most men in the area. Eliza found herself sharing too. Small things at first. Her mother's recipes, her father's love of books, the way she'd once dreamed of being a teacher. "You could still do that," Daniel said. "What?" "Teach. You're smart. You're patient. You'd be good at it." "I didn't even finish school myself." "So, finish now. Walter's got books. I'm sure he'd let you borrow them." The idea settled into Eliza's mind like a seed. Maybe. Someday. They arrived in Cedar Ridge as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The town hall was already lit up, music spilling out into the street. People milled around outside, chatting and laughing. Daniel helped Eliza down from the wagon. His hand lingered on hers for just a moment longer than necessary. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready." They walked in together. The dance was exactly as Daniel had described. Nothing fancy, but warm and lively. The music came from a small band in the corner, fiddle, guitar, and someone on a makeshift drum. The floor was already crowded with couples spinning and stepping. Daniel led her onto the floor with more confidence than she'd expected. He wasn't graceful exactly, but he was steady. Sure, he held her like she mattered. They danced 3 songs, then took a break for punch and conversation. People Eliza didn't know came up to say hello, to welcome her to town, to compliment her dress. It was overwhelming and wonderful. She was laughing at something Daniel said when she saw him. Victor Hale, standing in the doorway, his eyes scanning the crowd, scanning for her. The laughter died in her throat. The punch cup slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. "Eliza?" Daniel's voice seemed to come from far away. "Eliza, what's wrong?" She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to disappear before Victor saw her. But it was too late. His eyes found hers across the room. Recognition flashed, followed by something cold and possessive. He started walking toward her. "Eliza." Daniel's hands were on her shoulders now, grounding her. "Talk to me. What's happening?" "Him," she managed. "The man I told you about. Victor. He's here." Daniel's expression transformed. All the warmth drained out, replaced by something hard and dangerous. "Stay behind me," he said quietly. Victor crossed the room with the confidence of a man used to getting what he wanted. He was tall, well-dressed, handsome in a sharp-edged way. Everything about him screamed money and privilege. "Eliza," he said, his voice carrying false warmth. "What a surprise. I've been looking everywhere for you." "I have nothing to say to you, Victor." "Now, is that any way to greet family, especially after you left so abruptly?" His eyes flicked to Daniel, dismissive. "Who's your friend?" "None of your concern," Daniel said flatly. "I'm sorry, I don't believe we've been introduced. I'm Victor Hale, Eliza's cousin and guardian." "She doesn't need a guardian. That's not for you to decide, is it?" Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. Eliza, we need to talk. About your responsibilities. About what you owe me for the care I provided. I owe you nothing. Your father's debts were paid. I checked with the bank before I left. You've been lying, Victor, about all of it. Something flickered in Victor's expression. Anger, quickly masked. You're confused, dear, emotional. Why don't you come outside with me so we can discuss this privately? She's not going anywhere with you, Daniel said. Victor's attention focused on him fully for the first time. And you are? Someone who's about to tell you to leave. She's made it clear she doesn't want to talk to you. Time to respect that and go. This is family business. This is harassment. The music had stopped. People were watching now, a circle forming around them. Victor's mask slipped further. Eliza, if you know what's good for you, don't. Her voice was stronger now, anger burning through the fear. Don't threaten me. Don't pretend you care. You wanted one thing from me, and when I said no, you tried to take it anyway. I'm done being afraid of you. You little... Victor reached for her arm. Daniel moved faster, stepping between them with lethal precision. Don't touch her. Or what? You'll start something in a public place? Over hired help? She's not hired help. She's a valued member of Iron Ridge Ranch. She's under Walter Boone's protection, and she's with me. Daniel's voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the now silent room. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to turn around and walk out that door. You're going to stay away from her. And if I ever see you near her again, we're going to have a very different kind of conversation. Understood? Victor laughed, but it was brittle. You can't. Yes, I can. And I will. For a long moment, they stood locked in silent confrontation. Then Walter Boone pushed through the crowd. Problem here, Mercer? This man is bothering Miss Hart, sir. Walter looked at Victor with the same assessing gaze he'd given Eliza that first day. That true? This is a private family matter, Victor said stiffly. Doesn't look private to me. Looks like you're making threats in a public place. Walter crossed his arms. I know who you are, Hale. Silver Creek boarding house. Heard some stories about how you treat the people under your roof. None of them good. Those are lies. Maybe. Maybe not. But I trust my people, and they say you're trouble. So I'm going to suggest the same thing Daniel did. Leave. Now, before this gets uglier. Victor's face had gone red. You can't throw me out. Can and will. This is my town too, and I don't abide men who scare women. The sheriff appeared at Walter's shoulder, a solid man in his 60s named Tom Patterson. Everything all right, Walter? Just escorting someone out, mister. Hale was just leaving. Victor looked around at the circle of faces, hard, unsympathetic, united against him. He was outnumbered and outmatched. This isn't over, he said to Eliza. Yes, she said clearly, it is. Two ranch hands Daniel didn't know personally stepped forward, flanking Victor. The message was clear. Leave voluntarily or be removed. Victor left. The tension broke like a snapped string. Conversation resumed. The music started again. But people kept coming up to Eliza, offering quiet words of support, making sure she was okay. Daniel led her outside into the cool spring air. You all right? He asked. I think so. I'm shaking. That's adrenaline. It'll pass. He pulled her into a gentle embrace, just holding her while she trembled. You were amazing in there. I was terrified. You didn't show it. You stood up to him, told him no. That took courage. Eliza pressed her face against his shoulder. He could come back. Let him try. He knows now you're not alone. You've got people. You've got the ranch. You've got Walter. A pause. You've got me. She pulled back enough to look up at him. In the light spilling from the dance hall, his eyes were serious and warm. Do I? She asked softly. Have you? For as long as you want me. That might be a long time. Good. He kissed her then, gentle and careful, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. She kissed him back, pouring every ounce of gratitude and hope and growing love into it. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. Eliza Hart, he said, You are the most remarkable woman I've ever met. I'm just a cook. You're so much more than that, and someday I'm going to make sure you know it. They stayed outside for a while, just being together. Inside, the music played on. The dance continued. But something had changed, something fundamental. Eliza wasn't running anymore. She was standing her ground, building a life, choosing her own path, and Daniel was walking it with her. They rode back to Iron Ridge under a canopy of stars, the wagon wheels creaking a familiar rhythm on the dirt road. Eliza sat closer to Daniel than she had on the way into town, their shoulders touching with each bump and sway. Neither spoke much, but the silence between them had changed from comfortable to something charged with possibility. When they reached the ranch, Daniel helped her down from the wagon with hands that lingered at her waist. The moon was nearly full, painting everything in silver light. "Thank you," Eliza said softly, "for tonight, for standing up for me. You stood up for yourself, I just backed you up. Still, I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't been there." "You would have handled it. You're stronger than you think." He hesitated, then added, "But I'm glad I was there anyway." She rose on her toes and kissed his cheek, quick and light. "Good night, Daniel." "Good night, Eliza." She walked to her cabin feeling lighter than she had in years, despite the confrontation with Victor. Or maybe because of it. She'd faced him, said no in front of witnesses, and he'd been the one who left. That night she slept deeply and without nightmares for the first time in memory. Spring unfurled across the mountains with aggressive beauty. Wildflowers carpeted the meadows in waves of purple and yellow. The creeks ran high with snowmelt, rushing and churning over rocks. Calves were born in the pastures, wobbly-legged and curious. The ranch came alive with the kind of work that meant growth instead of just survival. Eliza and Daniel fell into a new rhythm. Nothing was formally declared, no announcements made. But everyone at the ranch understood that something had shifted between them. Daniel started taking his meals a little slower, staying to help with dishes more often. Eliza found excuses to bring him coffee when he was working near the house. They'd walk together in the evening sometimes, down to the creek or up the hill behind the barn, talking about everything and nothing. Tommy started calling them the lovebirds until Marcus cuffed him upside the head and told him to mind his own business. Walter watched it all with his usual inscrutable expression, but Eliza caught him smiling into his coffee one morning when Daniel forgot his hat at the breakfast table for the third time that week. By May, the wildflowers had given way to green grass and the cattle were fat and healthy. Walter announced they'd be driving 100 head to market in Denver in June, which meant the hands were busy with preparations and everyone's spirits were high. A good market run meant bonuses and a little extra money for everyone. Eliza was in the kitchen one afternoon making bread and humming to herself when she heard horses approaching. Not unusual, but something made her look out the window. 3 riders. Strangers, well-dressed, mounted on expensive horses. The lead rider was Victor Hale. Her blood went cold. She dropped the dough and ran to find Walter. He was in the barn with Daniel and Ben checking tack. "He's here," she said breathlessly. "Victor, he brought others with him." Daniel's head snapped up. "How many?" "3 total." Walter's jaw tightened. "Ben, go get Marcus and Tommy, quiet-like. Daniel, with me. Miss Eliza, you stay in the house. Walter, that's not a request. Stay inside, lock the door if you need to." They moved quickly, Walter and Daniel heading toward the main house while Ben slipped away to gather the others. Eliza wanted to argue, wanted to stand her ground, but she also knew that her presence would only complicate things. She retreated to the kitchen and watched through the window. Victor and his companions had dismounted in the yard. The 2 men with him were rough-looking types, clearly hired muscle rather than friends. One had a gun on his hip, worn easy like he knew how to use it. Walter walked out to meet them, Daniel slightly behind and to his right. Even from a distance, Eliza could read the tension in Daniel's shoulders. "Help you gentlemen with something?" Walter's voice carried clearly in the spring air. "I'm looking for my cousin," Victor said. "Eliza Hart. I have reason to believe she's here. And if she is, then I'd like to speak with her. Family business. She's made it clear she doesn't want to speak with you. You were told that in town, in front of witnesses." Victor's smile was cold. I'm not asking permission. I'm informing you that I'll be taking her with me. She belongs in Silver Creek. She belongs exactly where she chooses to be, and she chose here. She's confused, emotional. She doesn't know what's best for her. She knows just fine, Daniel said quietly, and you need to leave. One of Victor's companions moved his hand closer to his gun. I don't think you're in a position to make demands, Cowboy. Marcus, Tommy, and Ben emerged from various points around the yard, spreading out in a loose semicircle. None of them were armed, but they were present, a show of numbers. Victor's eyes flicked around, calculating odds. This is kidnapping. I could have the law on you. Go ahead, Walter said. Sheriff Patterson knows the situation. He was there at the dance, remember? Heard you making threats. Saw you get escorted out. You want to involve the law, you go right ahead and do that. But you're not taking Miss Hart anywhere she doesn't want to go. I have rights. You have nothing, Eliza said. Everyone turned. She stood on the porch, hands clenched at her sides. Her heart was racing, but her voice was steady. I told you to stay inside, Walter said. I know, but this is my fight. She walked down the steps, forcing herself not to shake. Victor, you need to hear this clearly. I don't owe you anything. My father's debts were paid. I checked. You lied about that, just like you lied about caring for me out of family duty. You wanted something from me I wasn't willing to give, and when I said no, you tried to take it anyway. That's assault, Victor. That's the crime here. Not anything these people have done. Victor's face had gone red. You ungrateful little... Choose your next words carefully, Daniel said, his voice deadly quiet. The man with the gun shifted his weight. Boss, maybe we should... Shut up! Victor's control was slipping, the polished facade cracking. Eliza, if you don't come with me right now, I will ruin you. I will tell everyone in Silver Creek exactly what kind of woman you are. I will make sure you never work anywhere respectable again. Go ahead, tell them. I don't care what people in Silver Creek think of me. I have a home here. I have work. I have people who actually care about me, not what they can take from me. She took a step forward. You have no power over me anymore. None. And the sooner you accept that and leave, the better it will be for everyone. This is your last chance. No. This is yours. Leave now, while you still can, or I will go to Sheriff Patterson myself and file a formal complaint about what you tried to do to me, about how you grabbed me, how you tried to force yourself into my room, how you told me I owed you my body because you paid for my food. The silence that followed was absolute. Victor stared at her, something ugly and desperate in his eyes. Then he lunged forward, hand outstretched to grab her. He didn't make it 2 steps. Daniel hit him like a freight train, tackling him to the ground. They rolled in the dirt, Victor swinging wild, Daniel controlled and precise. One solid punch to Victor's jaw, and the fight went out of him. Victor's companions reached for their weapons. Marcus and Ben moved faster, grabbing arms, twisting wrists. The gun clattered to the ground. Enough! Walter's voice cracked like a whip. Everyone froze. Walter walked over to where Daniel had Victor pinned in the dirt. Mr. Hale, you've assaulted someone on my property, brought armed men onto my land, made threats against my employee. I'm within my rights to shoot you where you lay and call it defense. You understand that? Victor spat blood. You wouldn't dare. Try me. I'm a patient man, but my patience has limits. Walter nodded to Daniel. Let him up. Daniel released him slowly, ready to react if Victor tried anything else, but the fight had gone out of him. He climbed to his feet, brushing dirt from his expensive clothes. You're going to regret this, Victor said, but there was no heat in it now, just petulant anger. I doubt it. Now you and your friends are going to get on your horses and ride out. And you're not coming back. Not to Iron Ridge, not to Cedar Ridge, not anywhere near Miss Hart. Because if I hear you've been bothering her again, I won't be as pleasant as I was today. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Eliza's voice cut through his bluster. It's over because I'm done being afraid of you. I'm done letting you control any part of my life. You're nothing to me, Victor. Nothing but a bad memory I'm choosing to leave behind. Something in her words seemed to finally penetrate. Victor looked at her, really looked at her, and whatever he saw there made him flinch. He gestured sharply to his men. They collected their horses in silence. Before mounting, Victor turned back one last time. You think these people actually care about you? They're using you, just like everyone else. You'll see. No, Eliza said quietly. They're giving me a chance, something you never did. Victor rode out without another word, his hired men trailing behind. Everyone watched until they were out of sight, dust settling in their wake. Only then did Eliza's legs start to shake. Daniel was there immediately, steadying her. Easy. It's over. He's gone. He'll come back. No, he won't. Walter's voice was firm. Men like that are cowards at heart. He came with muscle because he knew he couldn't face you alone. You stood up to him in front of witnesses twice now. He's done. He knows it. You can't be sure. I'll make sure. Walter nodded to Marcus. You still got family in Silver Creek? My sister married a deputy there, yeah. Write to her. Let her know what happened. Make sure the local law knows Hale's behavior. Create a record. That way if he tries anything, there's already a paper trail. Marcus nodded. Consider it done. The other hands drifted back to their work, but the tension lingered. Eliza felt it in her shoulders, her jaw, the tight knot in her stomach. Come on, Daniel said gently. Let's get you inside. He guided her back to the house, into the kitchen. Her bread dough had risen too much, was starting to spill over the bowl. She stared at it, somehow unable to process what to do next. Daniel took the bowl, punched down the dough with practiced efficiency, and set it aside to rise again. How do you know how to do that? Eliza asked. My mother taught me, before she died. He washed his hands, dried them. Eliza, you did good out there. I was terrified. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you're scared and you do it anyway. He pulled out a chair. Sit. I'll make you some tea. You should be sitting. Let someone take care of you for once. She sat. Watched him move around her kitchen with surprising competence, boiling water, finding the tea tin, preparing it the way she liked it. When he set the cup in front of her, their fingers brushed. Thank you, she said, for everything, for defending me, you don't need to thank me for that. I'd do it again in a heartbeat. He sat across from her. But Eliza, you need to understand something. What happened out there, that was all you. You faced him down. You told your truth. You didn't back down. I just made sure he didn't put his hands on you. I couldn't have done it without knowing you were there. Maybe. But you'll get stronger. Strong enough to face anything. I've seen it happening these last months. You're not the same woman I met outside that store. No, she agreed softly. I'm not. They sat in comfortable silence, drinking tea while the afternoon sun slanted through the windows. Outside, the ranch returned to its normal rhythms. But something had been settled today. Some final ghost laid to rest. That evening, after dinner was cleared and the hands had retreated to the bunkhouse, Daniel found Eliza on the porch of her cabin. She was wrapped in the crimson coat despite the mild spring evening, watching the stars emerge. Cold? He asked. No, just, I like the weight of it. The reminder. He understood. That coat had become a symbol of more than just warmth. It was the moment her life changed, the proof that kindness existed. Can I sit? Please. They sat on the porch steps, shoulders touching. In the distance, a coyote called to the rising moon. What Victor said, Eliza began, about people using me. Do you think? No. Walter gave you a job because he needed a cook, and you can cook. The hands like you because you're good at what you do and you don't cause trouble. And He trailed off. You? I care about you because you're strong and kind and you make me laugh. Because when I see you, I see someone worth knowing, worth protecting, He took a breath. Worth loving, if I'm being honest. Eliza turned to face him. In the dim light, his eyes were serious. Daniel Mercer, are you telling me you love me? I'm trying to, not doing a great job of it, apparently. You're doing fine. She reached for his hand, laced her fingers through his. I think I might love you too. I'm still figuring it out. Still learning what that means when it's real and not just expected or demanded. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. What if I need a lot of time? Then I'll be here. A week, a month, a year, however long it takes for you to be sure. She leaned her head on his shoulder. I don't deserve you. That's backwards. I don't deserve you. but I'm selfish enough to try anyway." They sat like that for a long time, watching the stars wheel overhead. There was no urgency between them, no pressure, just two people learning to trust, to hope, to imagine a future that might include each other. Summer arrived with heat that shimmered off the rocks and turned the meadows golden. The cattle drive to Denver went smoothly, and Walter returned with good prices and better spirits. True to his word, everyone got bonuses. Eliza saved hers carefully, watching her small savings grow. She and Daniel courted properly by the standards of the time. He'd ride with her to town when she needed supplies. They'd walk together in the evenings. Once he brought her wildflowers he'd picked on the far pasture, presented with such awkward sincerity that she'd laughed and kissed him right there in front of anyone who cared to see. The hands had cheered, Walter had rolled his eyes but smiled, and Eliza had felt, for the first time in her life, completely and utterly free. By August, she knew. The uncertainty had crystallized into certainty. She loved Daniel Mercer, loved his quiet strength, his steady presence, the way he treated her like an equal partner rather than a possession. She loved how he made her laugh, how he listened when she talked, how he'd started teaching her to ride properly so she wouldn't have to depend on others for transportation. She loved him, completely, without reservation. The question was how to tell him. She was contemplating this one evening while making dinner when Walter appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Miss Eliza, got a minute?" "Of course, Mr. Boone." He stepped inside, hat in hands. It was unusual to see him uncertain, but something in his expression suggested he was working up to something. "You've been with us 6 months now," he said. 7, actually. As of last week. 7 months. And in that time you've become part of this place. The ranch runs better with you here. The men are happier. Even the cattle seem calmer. A small smile. "That might be stretching it, but you understand my meaning." "Thank you. I'm glad to be here. I know you and Daniel have been... That is, I'm not blind. I see how things are between you." Eliza felt her face heat. "We haven't done anything improper. I'm not suggesting you have. Daniel's a good man, honorable, and you're a good woman. What I'm trying to say, and doing it poorly, is that I'd like to make you an offer." He pulled a paper from his pocket, unfolded it carefully. "I own some land east of here, about 40 acres along the ridge. Good water, decent grazing, close enough to town but far enough for privacy. I bought it years ago thinking I might expand, but I'm getting older and I've got enough to manage with what I have." "Mr. Boone, I don't understand. I'd like to sell it to Daniel, at a price he can actually afford. And I'm telling you because I figure if he's going to buy land, he ought to know if there's a future that includes someone else. Someone who might want a say in where they settle." Eliza stared at him. "You think Daniel wants to propose?" "I think Daniel's been wanting to propose for months, but he's too damn noble to push you before you're ready. So I'm giving you a heads up. If you don't want this, if you're not ready, you tell me now and I'll drop the whole thing." "But if you do want it..." He trailed off meaningfully. "What made you think of this?" Walter's expression softened. "I had a wife once, long time ago. Mary. She died in childbirth, her and the baby both. I never remarried, never saw the point, but I remember what it felt like, having someone to build a life with. And when I see you two together, I see what Mary and I had. Seems a shame to let that slip away because of pride or timing or money." Eliza's eyes stung. "That's very kind of you." "It's selfish, actually. Good hands are hard to find. If Daniel starts his own place, I'll lose him eventually. But if he's close by, maybe we can still work together, and I'll know he's happy." Walter cleared his throat gruffly. "So, what do you say?" "I say yes. Yes to all of it. I want a future with Daniel. I want to build something with him. And if he asks, I'll say yes to that too." Walter nodded, clearly relieved. "Good. That's good. I'll talk to him tomorrow." "Mr. Boone, why are you doing this? Really?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Because you remind me of Mary. She had that same steel underneath, that same determination to make her own way. And because sometimes, when you've lost something precious, the next best thing is helping someone else find it." After he left, Eliza stood in the kitchen, hands pressed to her mouth, trying not to cry. Everything was coming together. Everything was falling into place. She almost couldn't believe it. The next evening, Daniel asked her to walk with him after dinner. Nothing unusual, but there was something in his manner that suggested this wasn't an ordinary walk. They climbed the hill behind the barn, up to where the view opened onto the whole valley. The sun was setting, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. "Walter talked to me today," Daniel said as they stood looking out over the land. "Did he?" "About some property he's willing to sell. 40 acres. Good land. A place where someone could build a life." "That sounds wonderful." "It does. But I've been thinking about it all day, and I realized something." He turned to face her. "I don't want to build a life alone. I don't want land or a house or any of it if you're not part of it." Eliza's heart was pounding. "Daniel, let me finish, please. I've been trying to figure out how to say this for months." He took her hands in his. "Eliza Hart, you are the bravest, strongest, most remarkable woman I've ever known. You walked through hell to get here, and you came out the other side still kind, still hopeful, still you, and I love you. I love you so much it scares me sometimes. So I'm asking, if you're ready, if you want this too, will you marry me? Will you build that life with me?" She was crying now, but they were good tears, happy tears. "Yes, yes, of course, yes. I love you, Daniel. I want to build everything with you." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. When they finally pulled apart enough to look at each other, both of them were grinning like fools. "I don't have a ring yet," he said. "I wanted to ask first, make sure—" "I don't need a ring, I just need you. You'll get both. The ring and me. Everything I have is yours." They kissed as the sun set behind the mountains, painting their future in gold. The announcement at breakfast the next morning was met with cheers, backslapping, and Tommy demanding to know if he got to be best man since he'd called it first. Walter raised his coffee cup in a quiet toast. "To Daniel and Eliza, may you build something that lasts." "To Daniel and Eliza," the hands echoed. Plans began immediately. They'd marry in early October before the worst of winter, but after harvest. Walter offered the ranch for the ceremony. Emma Hayes volunteered to make the cake. The whole town would be invited. But first there was land to prepare and a house to build. Daniel and Eliza rode out to the 40 acres the following weekend. It was beautiful country, just as Walter had said. Rolling meadows backed by pine forest, a creek running along the southern border, views of the mountains in every direction. "There," Eliza said, pointing to a small rise. "That's where the house should go." "You're sure?" "Positive. Morning sun, afternoon shade, protected from the north wind, perfect." Daniel grinned. "Yes, ma'am, the lady has spoken." They stood together on the land that would be theirs, planning and dreaming. A house with a real kitchen, room for children someday if they were blessed, space for animals and a garden and all the life they would build together. "Thank you," Eliza said softly. "For what?" "For stopping that day, for buying me a coat, for seeing me when everyone else looked away. Best decision I ever made. Mine too, choosing to trust you, choosing to stay, choosing this life." "You chose yourself first," Daniel said. "Everything else followed from that." He was right, Eliza realized. She had chosen, had claimed her own agency, her own worth. The code had been a beginning, but she'd walked the rest of the path herself. And now she was choosing again. Choosing love. Choosing partnership. Choosing a future she'd once thought impossible. The summer sun was warm on her shoulders. The man she loved stood beside her, and ahead, on land that would be theirs, she could almost see the house they'd build, the life they'd create. It was more than she'd ever dared to hope for, and it was only the beginning. The months between engagement and wedding passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Daniel worked every spare moment on the house, rising before dawn to put in hours at Iron Ridge, then heading to their land to build until darkness made it impossible to see. The other hands helped when they could, raising walls and framing the roof, turning raw lumber into the skeleton of a home. Eliza watched it take shape with wonder. She'd spent her entire life in spaces that belonged to other people, places where she existed on sufferance or obligation. This house, small as it was, would be hers. Theirs. Built by hands that loved her, on land they'd chosen together. She continued cooking at the ranch, saving every penny of her wages. Walter had been more than generous with the land price, but there were still supplies needed, furniture to buy or build, 100 small expenses that added up. She kept a careful ledger, tracking every dollar, planning for the future with the same precision she brought to managing the ranch kitchen. "You're going to wear that pencil down to nothing," Emma Hayes said one afternoon in late August. Eliza had come to town to order fabric for her wedding dress, and Emma had insisted on tea afterward. "I just want to make sure we're prepared, that we don't get caught short." "Honey, you could have $1,000 in the bank and you'd still worry about being caught short. That's what happens when you've known real want." Emma poured more tea. "But you need to let yourself enjoy this too. You're getting married. You're building a life. That's cause for celebration, not just careful planning." Eliza smiled. "I am enjoying it, I promise. It's just still hard to believe it's real sometimes." "I know that feeling. When I first opened the restaurant, I'd wake up every morning certain someone was going to come tell me it was all a mistake." Emma leaned forward. "But it wasn't a mistake, and neither is this. You and Daniel, you're solid. Anyone with eyes can see it. He's building me a house. He's building you both a home. There's a difference." The distinction mattered more than Eliza could articulate. A house was shelter. A home was belonging. And for someone who'd spent so long without either, the difference was everything. By September, the house had walls and a roof and actual windows. Daniel had splurged on glass panes instead of oiled paper, wanting Eliza to have light and views. The kitchen was taking shape with a proper stove he'd bought used from a family moving back east. There was a main room with a stone fireplace, a bedroom, and a small loft that could serve as storage or, someday, a child's room. "It's not fancy," Daniel said as he showed her the latest progress. "Not like the houses in town with their gingerbread trim and painted shutters, but it's solid. It'll keep out the weather, and we can add on as we need to." "It's perfect," Eliza said, running her hand along the doorframe he'd just hung. "Absolutely perfect." "You keep saying that. I think you might be biased." "I'm not biased. I'm in love. There's a difference." He pulled her close, kissing her forehead. 2 weeks until we're married. 13 days. I've been counting." "Me too." They stood in the empty house, holding each other, imagining the life that would fill these rooms. Meals at the table Daniel was building, evenings by the fire, mornings waking up together, children, maybe, if they were blessed. Years stacking on years, building something that would outlast them both. "I got you something," Daniel said, pulling back slightly. "For the wedding. Well, for after the wedding, technically." "Daniel, you didn't need to. I wanted to." He pulled a small box from his pocket, handed it to her. Inside was a ring, simple gold band, no stones or decoration, but polished to a warm shine. "It was my mother's," he said quietly. "The only thing I kept after she died. I had it sized for you. Emma helped me guess at your measurement." Eliza's vision blurred with tears. "Daniel, I can't take your mother's ring." "Yes, you can. She'd want you to have it. She'd want it to be worn by someone loved, not sitting in a drawer. And you are loved, Eliza. So loved." She slipped it on. It fit perfectly, settling on her finger like it had always belonged there. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'll take care of it. I promise." "I know you will. You take care of everything you're given, including me." The wedding was set for October 8th, a Saturday. The whole week before, the ranch buzzed with preparation. Walter had declared the day a holiday, giving everyone time off to help or attend. Emma was orchestrating the food with military precision. The town hall had been reserved. Even the weather seemed to be cooperating, providing clear blue skies and temperatures that were crisp but not cold. Eliza's dress was simple ivory cotton, but Emma had helped her embroider delicate flowers along the hem and cuffs. It fit beautifully, made her feel like someone worth looking at. The night before the wedding, tradition dictated that Daniel sleep at the ranch while Eliza stayed in her cabin. She lay awake for hours, too excited to sleep, watching moonlight paint patterns on her walls. Tomorrow, she would marry Daniel Mercer. Tomorrow, her life would change again, but this time by choice, this time into something beautiful. She thought about the woman she'd been, pressed against that wall in the cold, certain she'd die unnoticed and unmourned. That woman felt like someone else now, someone she'd left behind like an old coat. The crimson coat hung on its peg, visible in the moonlight. She'd never gotten rid of it, never would. It was a reminder of where she'd been and how far she'd come. Tomorrow she'd wear ivory and flowers, but she'd never forget the red. The morning dawned clear and golden. Eliza woke to Emma knocking on her door, arms full of flowers and what looked like half the contents of her restaurant kitchen. Up, up, Emma commanded. We've got a wedding to prepare for and only 6 hours to do it. The wedding isn't until 2, which means we're already behind. Come on, let's get you fed and beautiful, though honestly you're already halfway there. The next few hours passed in a whirlwind. Emma did her hair, pinning it up in a style that was elegant but simple. Someone had picked wildflowers, and they wove them through the arrangement. The dress went on carefully, buttoned up the back by Emma's steady hands. When Eliza finally looked at herself in the small mirror, she barely recognized the woman looking back. She looked happy, hopeful, like someone who believed in the future. "Oh, honey," Emma said, her own eyes wet. "You're beautiful. It's just the dress. It's not the dress. It's you. You're glowing." There was a knock at the door. Walter's gruff voice came through. "Miss Eliza, you about ready? We've got a bridegroom at the town hall who's about to wear a hole in the floor with his pacing." Emma opened the door. Walter stood there in his best suit, looking uncomfortable but sincere. When he saw Eliza, his expression softened. "Well now, don't you clean up nice?" "Thank you, Mr. Boone, for everything. For the job, the protection, the land, for giving us a chance. You earned every bit of it, both of you." He offered his arm. "Now, if you're ready, I'd be honored to walk you down the aisle. Your father can't be here to do it, but I'd like to stand in if you'll have me." Eliza felt tears threaten. "I'd like that very much." The ride to town was surreal. Emma drove the wagon while Walter sat in back with Eliza, making sure her dress didn't get dusty. They didn't talk much, but the silence was comfortable. Cedar Ridge's town hall had been transformed. Someone had strung up garlands of evergreen and late-blooming flowers. Chairs were arranged in neat rows. It seemed like half the town had turned out, faces Eliza recognized from the store, the restaurant, the dance. These were her people now, her community. Daniel stood at the front with the minister, Tommy beside him as best man. When the doors opened and he saw Eliza, his whole face transformed. The nervousness disappeared, replaced by pure joy. Walter walked her down the aisle with measured steps. When they reached the front, he placed Eliza's hand in Daniel's and stepped back. "Take care of her," Walter said quietly. "With my life," Daniel replied. The ceremony itself was simple. Traditional vows exchanged with voices that shook slightly with emotion. Daniel's hands were steady as he slipped the ring onto her finger, the gold band settling next to his mother's ring. Eliza's hands trembled as she placed a matching band on his. "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Daniel, you may kiss your bride." Daniel cupped her face gently, kissed her with a tenderness that made her heart ache. The room erupted in applause and cheers. They were married. Actually, legally, permanently married. Eliza was no longer alone in the world. She had a partner, a husband, a future. The reception that followed was loud and joyful. Emma's food was spectacular. Someone produced a fiddle and people danced. Eliza danced with Daniel, then with Walter, then with each of the ranch hands who worked up the courage to ask. She laughed until her sides hurt, ate cake until she was stuffed, and felt more purely happy than she could ever remember being. As the sun began to set, Daniel leaned close and whispered, "Ready to go home?" Home. Their home. Yes, absolutely yes. They said their goodbyes amid a shower of rice and well wishes. Someone had decorated the wagon with ribbons. The ride to their land took 20 minutes, but it felt both endless and instantaneous. The house stood silhouetted against the darkening sky. Daniel had been here earlier, she realized. Smoke rose from the chimney. Light glowed in the windows. He helped her down from the wagon, then surprised her by sweeping her up in his arms. "What are you doing?" "Carrying my wife across the threshold. It's tradition." "I can walk." "I know you can, but humor me." He carried her inside and Eliza gasped. The house had been transformed. Someone, probably Emma, with help from the hands, had furnished it. The table was set with dishes and linens. The bed in the bedroom was made with a beautiful quilt. Candles burned on every surface, filling the space with warm light. Daniel set her down gently. "Welcome home, Mrs. Mercer." Mrs. Mercer. She was Mrs. Mercer now. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "How did you—" Had help. Everyone wanted to contribute something. Emma brought the dishes. Walter donated that quilt, said it was his wife's, and he wanted it to go to someone who'd use it. The hands built the furniture. Eliza walked through the rooms slowly, taking it all in. Everything carefully chosen or made, all of it for them. Evidence of community, of belonging, of people who cared. She turned to find Daniel watching her, his expression vulnerable. "Is it okay?" "I know it's not much. It's everything," she said firmly. "It's home, our home, and it's perfect." That night, they sat by the fire, still in their wedding clothes, talking quietly about the future. About crops they might plant and animals they might raise. About improvements to the house and the land. About dreams that felt possible now. "I want to help people," Eliza said, "the way I was helped. Women who need work or a safe place. I want to be someone they can come to." "We can do that. We've got room, we've got resources, and you've got the biggest heart of anyone I know. And I want to finish my education, maybe even teach someday." "Then you will. Whatever you want to do, Eliza, we'll make it happen." "What do you want?" Daniel thought about it. "This, you. A life built on honest work and love. Kids, if we're blessed. To be the kind of man my father was, the kind of husband my mother deserved." He paused. "To never take for granted what a gift this is, what you are." She kissed him then, soft and sweet. "I love you, Daniel Mercer. I love you too. More than I knew it was possible to love someone." The fire burned low, the candles guttered out one by one, and Eliza Hart Mercer fell asleep in her husband's arms, in her own bed, in her own house, for the first time in her life, completely and utterly safe. Winter came early that year, but Eliza and Daniel were prepared. Their home was snug and warm. Their pantry was stocked. Daniel had work lined up with Walter and 2 other nearby ranches, enough to keep them comfortable through the cold months. Eliza discovered she was pregnant in January. She'd suspected for a few weeks, but when Dr. Carson confirmed it, the reality hit her with overwhelming force. She was going to be a mother. She and Daniel were going to have a child. She walked home from town in a daze, one hand pressed to her still flat stomach. By the time she reached the house, tears were streaming down her face. Daniel found her sitting at the kitchen table crying. "Eliza, what's wrong? What happened?" "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. I'm pregnant. We're going to have a baby." His face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Shock, joy, terror, wonder. He knelt beside her chair, taking her hands. "Are you sure? Dr. Carson is sure?" "He's sure. Due in late summer, he thinks. August or early September." "A baby." Daniel's voice was hushed. "We're having a baby. Are you happy?" "Happy? Eliza, I'm terrified and thrilled, and I don't know what we're doing, but yes, I'm happy. So happy I can't even find words for it." They held each other, both crying now, overwhelmed by the magnitude of it. A child, a whole new person who would be theirs to raise and love and teach. "What if I'm not good at it?" Eliza asked. "I never had a mother to learn from, not really. What if I don't know how?" "Then we'll figure it out together. We'll make mistakes, probably, but we'll love this baby with everything we have. That's got to count for something." "What if something goes wrong, like with Walter's wife?" Daniel's arms tightened around her. "We'll get Dr. Carson. We'll be careful. We'll do everything right. And we'll hope. That's all anyone can do." The pregnancy progressed normally through winter and into spring. Eliza continued working at Iron Ridge for a while, though Walter insisted she take it easier, bringing in a young woman from town to help with the heavier tasks. By June, her belly was unmistakable, and Daniel worried constantly. "You shouldn't be on your feet so much." "I'm pregnant, not dying. Women have been doing this forever." "Not my woman, not my baby." "Your woman is fine. Your baby is fine. Stop fussing. But she loved that he fussed, loved that he cared, that he worried, that he made sure she had everything she needed. He'd already built a cradle, sanded smooth and perfect. They'd started collecting baby things, small clothes and blankets, and all the necessities. Emma threw her a party in July, inviting every woman in town. They brought gifts and advice and stories that were both reassuring and terrifying. Eliza accepted it all with grace, filing away the useful information and ignoring the horror stories. She was ready as anyone could be. The baby came on a sweltering August night 2 weeks earlier than expected. Eliza woke to pain that took her breath away, gripping Daniel's arm. It's time. He was up instantly, pulling on clothes, his face pale in the lamplight. I'll get Dr. Carson. Emma said to fetch her too. Don't move. Don't do anything. I'll be back as fast as I can. Daniel, I'm not going to... But he was already gone, racing into the night. Emma arrived first, taking charge with brisk efficiency. She got Eliza into a clean nightgown, changed the bedding, boiled water, and talked in a steady stream that was more comforting than any silence could have been. Dr. Carson arrived 20 minutes later, medical bag in hand. Daniel tried to follow him into the bedroom, but Emma physically blocked the door. You wait out there. This is women's work now. That's my wife, and she'll be fine. But you pacing and panicking won't help. Go, boil more water, stay close in case we need you, but stay out. The labor lasted 8 hours. 8 hours of pain that Eliza had never imagined, that no amount of stories had prepared her for. She screamed and swore and gripped Emma's hands hard enough to bruise. But Emma stayed with her, coaching her through it, wiping her face with cool cloths, telling her she was doing great. She was strong, just a little more. And finally, a thin wail filled the room. It's a boy, Dr. Carson announced, holding up a tiny, red-faced, furious infant. A healthy boy. Eliza collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted and euphoric. Emma cleaned the baby quickly, wrapped him in a soft blanket, and placed him in Eliza's arms. He was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a shock of dark hair. His eyes were squinted shut, his face scrunched in indignation at being born. But he was breathing, moving, alive. Hello, Eliza whispered. Hello, little one. I'm your mama. The door burst open. Daniel stood there, wild-eyed, looking like he'd aged 10 years and 8 hours. Is she... are they... They're fine, Emma said, smiling. Come meet your son. Daniel crossed the room in 3 strides. When he saw Eliza holding the baby, his face crumpled. Eliza, you're okay? I'm okay. We're okay. Look at him, Daniel. Look at what we made. Daniel touched the baby's tiny hand with one calloused finger. The infant's fingers curled around it reflexively, and Daniel made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. He's so small. He's perfect, Eliza corrected. Absolutely perfect. What do we name him? They'd discussed this, had a list of possibilities, but looking at her son, only one name felt right. Caleb, she said. Caleb Daniel Mercer. After my father, Daniel said softly. Are you sure? I'm sure. Your father was a good man. You've told me that. And this little one deserves to carry that forward. Doctor. Carson finished his work, declared both mother and baby healthy, and left them with instructions for care. Emma stayed a bit longer, making sure Eliza was comfortable, that she knew how to nurse, that everything was as it should be. When everyone finally left, it was just the 3 of them. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, one arm around Eliza, the other supporting Caleb. I can't believe he's real, Daniel said. I can't believe we have a son. We do. We really do. Caleb yawned, a tiny, perfect yawn. Then he settled against Eliza's chest and fell asleep, trusting and content. Thank you, Daniel said. For what? For him, for this, for being brave enough to bring him into the world. I didn't feel brave. I felt terrified. Bravery and terror aren't mutually exclusive. You were both. They sat in the quiet, watching their son sleep. Outside, the summer night was full of cricket song and the rustle of wind through the pines. Inside, their family was complete. The years that followed brought changes and growth. Caleb thrived, going from infant to toddler to a small boy with his father's quiet nature and his mother's determination. 2 years after Caleb, a daughter arrived, Clara, with dark curls and a laugh that could light up a room. 3 years after that, another daughter, Sarah, who was shy and gentle and loved books almost as much as breathing. The house expanded to accommodate them, rooms added as needed. The land prospered under Daniel's careful management. They raised cattle and horses, sold both at good prices. Eliza's garden produced vegetables enough to feed them and sell to town. They weren't rich, but they were comfortable. True to her word, Eliza helped other women who found themselves in situations like hers. Over the years, several young women stayed in the Mercer household, working and healing and finding their feet before moving on to their own lives. Some stayed in touch. Some disappeared into their new futures. All of them left knowing they'd been valued. Eliza also finished her education, studying with books borrowed from Walter and the town librarian. When Clara was 5, Eliza began teaching a small school in their home, taking on children from nearby ranches who couldn't make it to town daily. It grew until the community built a proper schoolhouse, and Eliza became Cedar Ridge's first official teacher. Daniel watched it all with quiet pride, supporting every dream, every ambition. He never once suggested Eliza should limit herself to home and children. Instead, he helped with the kids when she had lesson planning to do. He encouraged her learning, her teaching, her helping. They were partners. Equal. True. Walter Boone passed away when Caleb was 8, leaving a portion of Iron Ridge to Daniel in his will. The main ranch went to a nephew from back east, but the land connecting to the Mercer's property became theirs. They merged the operations, expanding their holdings and their prosperity. On their 10th anniversary, Daniel and Eliza stood on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. The children were inside, supposedly doing homework, but probably causing chaos. The sounds of their laughter drifted through the open windows. "You ever think about that day?" Daniel asked. "The one where I saw you outside Morrison's?" "All the time." "Me too. I think about how close I came to just walking past, how easy it would have been to mind my own business." "But you didn't." "No, I didn't, and it changed everything." Eliza leaned against him. "That coat is still in our closet, you know, the crimson one." "I know. I've seen it. I can't get rid of it. It feels wrong somehow." "Then don't. Keep it. Let it be a reminder." "Of what?" "That sometimes the smallest acts of kindness ripple outward in ways we can't predict. That stopping to help someone might change both your lives. That love is worth fighting for." He kissed her temple. "That you are worth everything I did, and more." Inside, something crashed, followed by Clara's indignant shriek and Caleb's attempt at innocent denial. Daniel sighed. We should probably, Eliza corrected with a smile. They went inside together, partners in parenting as in everything else, ready to mediate whatever disaster the children had created. The house was full of noise and life and love. The land stretched out around them, productive and beautiful. And two people who'd started with nothing but a coat and hope had built something that would last. Something that mattered. Something that proved, beyond any doubt, that kindness could change the world. The years accumulated like layers of sediment, each one adding depth and richness to the foundation Daniel and Eliza had built. Their children grew strong and capable, each carrying forward the values their parents had lived by. Caleb developed his father's quiet strength and his mother's fierce sense of justice. Clara inherited Daniel's steady hands and Eliza's quick mind. Sarah, the youngest, had her mother's love of learning and her father's gentle heart. By the time Caleb turned 16, he was already working the ranch alongside Daniel, learning not just the mechanics of cattle and land management, but the deeper lessons about integrity and hard work. Clara, at 14, helped her mother at the school 3 days a week while pursuing her own passion for medicine, riding to town twice a month to apprentice with Dr. Carson. Sarah, 12, had her nose perpetually in a book, already writing stories that showed a wisdom beyond her years. The ranch had grown into one of the most respected operations in the territory. The Mercer name meant something now, stood for quality and fairness, and the kind of business dealings where a handshake was as binding as any contract. Daniel had built that reputation board by board, decision by decision, never cutting corners or taking advantage. And Eliza, the woman who'd once thought herself worthless, had become a pillar of the community. Her school had educated 2 generations of children. Her home had sheltered more than 20 women over the years, each one leaving stronger than they'd arrived. When people in Cedar Ridge faced hardship, they came to Eliza Mercer, knowing they'd find help without judgment. On a crisp October morning, 23 years after that first frozen December day, Eliza stood in front of her school preparing for the day's lessons. She was 45 now, with silver threading through her dark hair and lines at the corners of her eyes from years of laughter. She'd never been beautiful in the conventional sense, but there was something luminous about her that age had only enhanced. The door opened and Emma Hayes entered, moving slower than she once had, but still sharp as ever. "Morning, Eliza. Thought I'd bring you some of those apple tarts you like." "Emma, you don't need to keep bringing me food. I can feed myself." "I know you can, but I enjoy it. Humor an old woman." Emma set the basket on Eliza's desk. "Besides, I wanted to talk to you about something." "What's that?" Emma pulled out a chair, settling into it with a slight groan. "I'm thinking of selling the restaurant. I'm 72 years old and my knees aren't what they used to be. Standing over that stove all day is getting harder." Eliza felt a pang. Emma's kitchen had been a constant in Cedar Ridge for as long as anyone could remember. "Oh, Emma, that's the end of an era. Everything ends eventually. The question is, do you know anyone who might be interested? Someone who'd keep it going right, not just turn it into some quick money scheme." Before Eliza could answer, the schoolhouse door burst open again. This time it was Clara, breathless and urgent. "Mama, you need to come. There's been an accident. Tommy Chen was working on the Miller Ranch and a horse kicked him. They brought him to our place because it's closer than town. Dr. Carson is on his way, but Papa thought you'd want to know." Eliza was already gathering her things. "Emma, can you watch the children? I'll send Sarah back to help." "Go. I've got them." Eliza hurried home with Clara, her mind racing. Tommy Chen, who'd been one of the first hands to welcome her all those years ago, who'd called her and Daniel lovebirds and cheered at their wedding, who'd become not just an employee, but a friend. When they reached the house, they found Tommy laid out on the kitchen table, his face gray with pain. Daniel was there, along with Caleb and 2 of their current ranch hands. Tommy's leg was clearly broken, bent at an unnatural angle. "Tommy," Eliza said, moving to his side. "You're going to be fine. Dr. Carson is coming." "Hurts like hell," Tommy managed through gritted teeth. "Sorry for the language, Miss Eliza." "I've heard worse, and I think we're past formalities at this point." She took his hand. "Just breathe. Focus on breathing." Dr. Carson arrived within the hour, now in his 70s, but still the best medical man in 3 counties. He examined Tommy's leg with practiced efficiency. "Clean break. Could be worse. We'll set it, splint it, and he'll be off his feet for 8 to 10 weeks. He looked at Tommy. "You got somewhere to stay while you heal? Can't be working? Can't be riding?" Tommy's face fell. "I've got a room at the boarding house in town, but I can't afford to keep it if I'm not working." "Stay here," Daniel said immediately. "I can't impose." "You're not imposing. We've got room. Eliza and the girls can make sure you eat right and don't try to do anything stupid before that leg heals." "Daniel's right," Eliza added. "You're staying. That's final." Dr. Carson set the leg with Caleb's help, Tommy biting down on a leather strap to keep from screaming. By the time it was done, he was pale and sweating, but the bone was aligned and splinted. They moved him to the guest room that had housed so many over the years. Clara, with her medical training, took charge of his immediate care, checking his temperature and making sure he had water and pain medicine. That evening, after Tommy was settled and sleeping, Daniel and Eliza sat on their porch watching the sunset. It had become their ritual over the years, this quiet time together at day's end. "You know," Daniel said, "we're not young anymore." "Speak for yourself." "I'm in my prime." He smiled. "You know what I mean. We've built something good here. But we should start thinking about the future, about what happens next. Caleb will take over the ranch eventually. We both know that. He will. He's ready, or he will be in a few years. But what about us? What do we want once we're not running everything ourselves?" Eliza thought about it. "I want to keep teaching, but maybe not full-time. Maybe just a few students, or private tutoring. I want to write down some of what I've learned, pass it on somehow, and I want to spend time with our grandchildren when they come. You think Caleb and Margaret will make us wait long? Caleb had married Margaret Foster 6 months earlier, a smart young woman from a neighboring ranch. I think we'll have our first grandchild within the year, Eliza predicted. She was right. The following spring, Margaret gave birth to a daughter they named Eliza May, and holding her tiny namesake, Eliza felt the circle complete in a way she hadn't expected. This child, born into love and security, would never know the fear and want that had defined Eliza's early years. That was the gift, she realized. That was what all the work had been for. The years continued their relentless march. Tommy healed and eventually opened a small horse training operation with money he'd saved and a loan from the Mercers that he insisted on repaying with interest. Clara finished her medical training and took over Dr. Carson's practice when he finally retired. Sarah published her first book of stories to surprising acclaim. Caleb and Margaret had 3 more children, filling the ranch with the sound of young voices again. Emma sold her restaurant to a young couple from back east who'd fallen in love with Cedar Ridge. True to form, she stayed on for a year to teach them everything she knew, then finally, truly retired. And Daniel and Eliza settled into a rhythm that was both new and familiar. They still worked, but not with the desperate intensity of their younger years. They could afford to slow down, to enjoy what they'd built. On their 30th anniversary, their children threw them a party that seemed to include half the territory. People Eliza had taught as children came with their own children. Women she'd helped over the years brought their families. Ranch hands past and present gathered to celebrate the couple who'd treated them like family. Quite a turnout, Daniel observed, watching the crowd mill around their yard. We've touched a lot of lives, Eliza said. You've touched a lot of lives. I just came along for the ride. That's not true, and you know it. We did this together. Marcus Tate, now in his 70s and long retired, approached with a glass raised. A toast to Daniel and Eliza Mercer, who proved that good people doing good work can build something that lasts. To Daniel and Eliza, the crowd echoed. Later that night, after everyone had left and the house was clean, Daniel and Eliza walked down to the creek that bordered their property. The moon was full, painting everything in silver light. Do you ever think about her? Daniel asked. The woman you were that day I found you? Sometimes. She feels like someone else now, someone I used to be. She was brave, walking away from Victor, even though she had nowhere to go. That took courage. I didn't feel brave. I felt desperate. Sometimes they're the same thing. Daniel picked up a smooth stone, turned it over in his hands. I think about him sometimes too. The man I was, working for wages, saving for a saddle, just going through the motions. Then I saw you and everything changed. Do you regret it? Spending that money on the coat instead of the saddle? Best $8 I ever spent. Changed my whole life. Mine too. They stood in comfortable silence, listening to the water move over rocks. 30 years of marriage, of partnership, of building something from nothing. It hadn't always been easy. There'd been lean years and sick children and droughts that tested their resolve, but they'd weathered it all together. I love you, Eliza said softly, in case I don't say it enough. You say it all the time, and I love you too. More now than even that first day, if that's possible. It's possible. Love grows if you tend it right, like anything else worth having. The following decade brought both joy and sorrow. Emma Hayes passed away peacefully in her sleep at 83, leaving the town she'd fed for 60 years. The funeral was standing room only, and Eliza spoke about the woman who'd shown her kindness when she needed it most, who'd become a second mother in all the ways that mattered. Dr. Carson followed 2 years later with Clara at his bedside. He'd trained her well, and the transition of his practice to her hands had been seamless, but his loss still hit hard. He delivered all 3 of Eliza's children, had been there for countless emergencies, had become part of the fabric of their lives. Marcus Tate died in his sleep one winter night, and Ben Morrison was thrown from a horse the following spring, breaking his neck. The generation that had welcomed Eliza to Iron Ridge all those years ago was passing, leaving holes that could never quite be filled. But there were joys too. More grandchildren arrived, 9 in total, each one a blessing. The ranch continued to prosper under Caleb's management. Sarah's second book won a prestigious award. Clara was named the Territorial Medical Association's Physician of the Year. And through it all, Daniel and Eliza remained constants. They aged together gracefully, their hair going silver, their bodies slowing, but their partnership as strong as ever. On a September afternoon, 45 years after that first meeting, Daniel was working on repairing a fence when he felt a sharp pain in his chest. He sat down hard, trying to catch his breath. Caleb found him there 10 minutes later and immediately sent for Clara. By the time she arrived, Daniel was in bed, pale and struggling. "Your heart," Clara said after examining him. "It's strained. You need to rest. Complete rest, Papa. No more fence repairs. No more heavy lifting. I'm fine. You're not fine. And if you don't listen to me, you won't be around to meet your 10th grandchild." That stopped him. "Margaret's expecting again?" "She told me yesterday, but she wanted to wait to tell you until she was sure." Daniel looked at Eliza, who sat beside the bed holding his hand. "Another grandchild. Another reason to take care of yourself," Eliza said firmly. "You heard Clara. Rest means rest." He did rest, though it chafed. Over the following weeks, his strength slowly returned, but it was clear that age had caught up with him. He was 68, had worked hard his entire life, and his body was demanding retirement. "I'm not ready to be old," he grumbled one morning. "Too bad. It's happening anyway," Eliza replied, though her tone was gentle. She was 66 herself, still teaching a few students, but mostly spending her time with grandchildren and writing a memoir she wasn't sure anyone would want to read. They adjusted. Caleb took over all ranch operations completely. Daniel became an advisor, a consultant, someone the younger generation could come to for wisdom, but who no longer bore the daily burden of management. It was strange at first, having so much time, but they filled it. Long walks, reading together in the evenings, teaching the grandchildren to ride and fish and garden, telling stories about the old days when Cedar Ridge was smaller and wilder and people like Walter Boone and Emma Hayes walked the streets. One December morning, 50 years to the day after Daniel had bought that coat, Eliza woke to find snow falling softly outside their window. She lay there watching it, thinking about time and memory and how far they'd come. "What are you thinking about?" Daniel's voice was rough with sleep. "That it's been 50 years since you saw me outside Morrison's." He was quiet for a moment, then, "Best day of my life." "Well, tied with the day we married and the days each of our children were born." "I want to go to town, to Morrison's. I want to see where it all started." "In the snow?" "Especially in the snow. That's how it was, remember? Cold and snow and me freezing to death." "You're not freezing to death now. You're in a warm bed with a man who loves you. Come with me anyway." They dressed warmly and rode to town in the wagon, moving slowly through the snow. Cedar Ridge had grown over the decades, but the core remained the same. Morrison's General Store still stood on the same corner, though Harvey Morrison had been gone for 20 years and his grandson ran it now. Eliza stood outside, looking at the wall where she'd pressed herself all those years ago. It seemed smaller now, less imposing, or maybe she was just bigger, stronger. "I was so scared," she said quietly, "so certain I was going to die. And then you turned around." "I almost didn't," Daniel admitted. "I had my hand on Russ's reins, was about to mount up. Then I heard you breathing, and I just couldn't walk away." "What made you turn back?" "I don't know. Conscience, maybe. Or fate. Or just basic human decency that so many others seemed to lack that day." He put his arm around her. "But I'm glad I did. Me too." They went into the store, warm and bright and full of goods. Young Morrison recognized them and came over immediately. "Mr. and Mrs. Mercer, what brings you out in this weather?" "Anniversary of sorts," Daniel said. "This is where we met, 50 years ago today." 50 years? That's remarkable. Congratulations." Young Morrison looked genuinely pleased. "My grandfather used to tell the story about the cowboy who bought a coat for a stranger and ended up marrying her. He said it was the most romantic thing he ever witnessed." "He sold me that coat," Daniel confirmed. $8, deep red wool." "You still have it?" young Morrison asked Eliza. "We do, carefully preserved. It's become something of a family heirloom." They made a few small purchases, more for the sake of supporting the store than from actual need, and headed home. But first, at Eliza's request, they stopped at the cemetery on the hill overlooking town. They visited Walter Boone's grave first, simple stone with just his name and dates. "He gave us everything," Eliza said, laying flowers she'd brought. "The land, the chance, the protection. We wouldn't be here without him." "He'd say we earned it," Daniel replied. "But you're right. We owe him more than we can ever repay." Emma's grave was nearby, and they visited her too. Then Dr. Carson's. Marcus. Ben. Tommy had died just last year, and his grave was still fresh. "So many gone," Eliza said, "but so many still here. Our children, our grandchildren, everyone we've touched over the years." They drove home through the falling snow, the wagon wheels leaving tracks that would soon be covered. Back at the house, their children had gathered for a surprise party. All three of them with their families, the house suddenly full of noise and life and love. "We're celebrating," Clara announced. 50 years since the day that started it all." "How did you know?" Eliza asked. "Mama, you've told the story every year on this date since we were old enough to understand it. Of course we knew." Caleb brought out the crimson coat, carefully preserved in tissue paper. It was faded now, the red less vibrant than it once was, but still whole, still beautiful in its way. "Tell us the story again," the youngest grandchildren begged. "Tell us about the coat." And so Eliza did, with Daniel filling in details, their voices weaving together as they always had. She told them about being cold and scared and alone, about the stranger who stopped when no one else did, about $8 that bought more than wool and warmth. "It bought hope," she said, "and possibility, and the chance at a life I never thought I could have." "It bought love," Daniel added, looking at her with eyes that still saw the woman she'd been and the woman she'd become. The party continued late into the evening. There was food and music and laughter. The grandchildren ran wild. The adults told stories and caught up on news and simply enjoyed being together. Later, after everyone had gone home or gone to bed in the various guest rooms, Daniel and Eliza sat by the fire in their bedroom. The coat lay across Eliza's lap, and she ran her fingers over the fabric. "We should give this to someone," she said. "Someone who can use it." "You want to give away the coat?" "Not give away. Pass on. To someone who needs a reminder that kindness exists, that people care." She looked up at him. "There's a woman who comes to Clara's clinic, young, maybe 20. She's in a bad situation from what Clara says. Husband who drinks and hits. She's scared to leave because she has nowhere to go. You want to help her?" "I want to give her options. Clara says she's been saving money secretly. If she had a place to stay, even temporarily, she might leave. She can stay here, in the guest house. We've got room." "I know, but I want to give her this too, so she knows she's not alone, so she has something to hold on to when everything feels impossible." Daniel studied her face, seeing the echoes of the frightened woman he'd met 50 years ago. "You've been helping people your whole life. Even now you're thinking about someone else." "Because someone helped me. Because you helped me. It's only right to pass it forward." The next week, Clara brought the woman to the ranch. Her name was Anna, and she had bruises on her arms that she tried to hide, and eyes that held the same wariness Eliza remembered from her own reflection. "Mrs. Mercer, I don't want to be any trouble. You're not trouble. You're someone who needs help, and I have help to give." Eliza took the coat from where she'd carefully wrapped it. "I want you to have this." Anna stared at it. "I can't take your coat." "Yes, you can. Someone gave it to me when I needed it most. It saved my life in more ways than one. Now I'm giving it to you, along with a safe place to stay for as long as you need it. No strings, no expectations, just help." Anna took the coat with shaking hands. When she put it on, something in her posture changed, straightened, like the weight of it gave her strength. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know how to repay you." "You don't repay it. You accept it. And someday, when you're strong and safe and whole, you help someone else. That's how it works." Anna stayed with them for 3 months. In that time, she filed for divorce, got a job at the school helping the new teacher, and started saving money. She moved into a small house in town, began building her own life on her own terms. Before she left, she tried to return the coat. Keep it, Eliza said, until you find someone who needs it more than you do. Then you pass it on. I will. I promise. The years turned over like pages in a book. Daniel's health continued to decline slowly, naturally. At 72, he spent most of his days in a chair by the fire, watching the ranch operate through the window, offering advice when asked but no longer able to do the physical work he'd once thrived on. Eliza stayed by his side, reading to him, talking with him, holding his hand. They spoke of their life together, of regrets few and joys many, of children raised and grandchildren loved, of a legacy that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with how they'd lived. I'm tired, Daniel said one evening in early spring. He was 74 and the winter had been hard on him. I know you are. I'm not complaining. I've had a good life, a long life, more than I ever expected. You're not leaving me yet. We have time still. Maybe. But Eliza, if I do go first, I need you to promise me something. Anything. Don't grieve too long. Don't lock yourself away. You've always been someone who helps people, who makes things better. Keep doing that. Live fully, even without me. Daniel, promise me. I promise. He died peacefully in his sleep 2 weeks later, Eliza beside him, their hands linked as they'd been for 54 years. The funeral brought people from across the territory, all of them coming to pay respects to a man who'd lived with integrity and died with dignity. Eliza stood strong throughout it, accepting condolences, comforting her children, being the rock everyone needed. But at night, alone in their bed, she wept for the man who'd saved her life, for the partner who'd walked beside her through 5 decades, for the love that had defined her existence. She kept her promise to him, though. She didn't lock herself away. She continued teaching occasionally. She finished her memoir and published it, dedicating it to Daniel and Walter and Emma and all the people who'd shown her kindness. She played with her great-grandchildren, 15 of them now, each one carrying forward the legacy in their own way. And she kept track of the coat. Anna had passed it to another woman, who'd passed it to another. It was traveling through the territory now, a symbol of hope and help, acquiring new stories with each person who wore it. At 78, Eliza stood on her porch one last time, looking out over the land she and Daniel had built together. The house had been good to them. The land had been generous. But more than that, they'd been good to each other. Caleb approached, now in his 50s, silver threading his own hair. Mama, we need to talk about something. What's that? Margaret and I want you to move into the main house with us. This place is too big for you alone, and we worry. I'm fine here. This is where your father and I built our life, where we raised you children. I'm not ready to leave it. Mama, I'll compromise. If it gets to be too much, I'll move, but for now, I want to stay. He sighed, but nodded. He knew better than to argue when she used that tone. Eliza lived another 7 years, active and engaged until the very end. At 85, she simply went to sleep one night and didn't wake up. Clara found her in the morning, peaceful in her bed, a small smile on her face. The funeral was even larger than Daniel's had been. Eliza had touched so many lives, helped so many people, that they came from everywhere to say goodbye. The church couldn't hold them all. Her children buried her beside Daniel on the hill overlooking the ranch, their headstones simple but together. And in Eliza's will, she left instructions for the coat. It was to be donated to the church, with a plaque explaining its history. Anyone who needed it could take it, wear it, find warmth and hope in it. And when they no longer needed it, they were to return it so the next person could benefit. The crimson coat hung in Cedar Ridge Church for another generation, continuing its work of providing warmth and symbolizing kindness. Eventually, too fragile to wear, it was preserved in a display case in the town museum, the plaque telling the story of a cowboy who stopped, and a woman who was saved, and the life they built together. Decades after both Daniel and Eliza were gone, their great-great-grandchildren would bring their own children to see it. They'd tell the story that had been passed down through the generations, about love and kindness, and the way small acts could ripple outward, changing lives in ways you could never predict. The ranch still stood, now run by Caleb's grandchildren. The school Eliza had taught in was named after her. The medical clinic Clara had run was now a small hospital. The books Sarah had written were still in print. The legacy they'd built wasn't in monuments or money, but in the lives they'd touched and the kindness they'd shown. On winter mornings, when the snow fell on Cedar Ridge the way it had that December day so long ago, people would sometimes stop outside what was once Morrison's general store. They'd stand there for a moment thinking about the story, about a man who turned around, about a woman who survived, about $8 and a coat and a love that lasted a lifetime. And they'd remember that kindness matters, that helping someone when they need it most can change everything, that the smallest acts of compassion can ripple outward in ways we never imagine. The story of Daniel and Eliza Mercer became legend in Cedar Ridge, not because they were rich or famous, but because they'd lived with integrity, because they'd built something real from nothing, because they'd proven that good people doing good things could make a lasting difference. And somewhere, in the museum case, the crimson coat remained, faded and fragile, but still beautiful, still meaningful, still a reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary things begin with the simplest choice, the choice to stop, the choice to care, the choice to help, the choice to see another human being in their moment of desperate need and decide that they matter. That was the legacy. That was what endured, not wealth or property or even the family name, though those continued too, but the simple, powerful truth that kindness can change a life, that love can be built on a foundation of respect and partnership, that two people who start with nothing but hope and each other can create something that lasts for generations. The cowboy saw her shivering outside the store. He bought her a coat, and she never left his side. It was a simple story, a true story, in all the ways that mattered. And in Cedar Ridge, Montana, on cold winter days when the snow falls and the wind cuts like glass, people still tell it, still remember, still believe in the power of one person choosing to help another. Because that's how the best stories end. Not with fanfare or spectacle, but with the quiet certainty that kindness matters, that love endures, that the choices we make echo far beyond our own lives. Daniel and Eliza Mercer had built something that lasted, not despite hardship, but through it, not by avoiding pain, but by facing it together, not with grand gestures, but with daily choices to be kind, to be faithful, to be true. And that in the end was everything.